Hello and welcome to Purely Academic, your potentially educational podcast. This is the monthly stuff for July 2026. I'm Dr. Jonathan Lack. I write about movies. I teach cinema studies at the University of Colorado, and I've taken a double dose of all my meds in preparation for today's very depressing episode. Because PlayStation may no longer be making game discs, but the fine people at GlaxoSmithKline are still making all the Wellbutrin you need to get through the day.
And I'm Sean Chapman, high school English teacher by day, otaku by night. I've been thinking about picking up some new hobbies, just in case, like maybe woodworking would be pretty cool. I could collect stuff like coins. There's just lots of things you can do in the world, just in case.
Woodworking is good. No one can take that away from you. There's always going to be knives. There's always going to be wood. That's a safe one, I think.
Yeah, I can. Everyone, people always need something to sit on.
Yeah.
So that's what you can do. Just build some chairs.
Indeed. If you can't tell from the tenor of our introduction, this is what I have called in the outline the video game apocalypse episode, because we have the honor of talking to you about the last month in video game news, which I think, I would say, without hesitation, is the worst month of video game news in my lifetime. Would you basically agree with that, Sean?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. Easily. It is. I mean, and it is that sort of remarkable 1-2 punch of the video game industry where in June, it was all, hey, here's all the games that we're making and all the ones that are coming out. And we're trying to, hawk our wares basically for the coming year. And then after those shows at the beginning of June, it's like, and here's where the other shoe drops, and it just kept going and going and going to where this podcast is about a week later than it probably would have been, because they're like, well, let's wait to let the dirt settle for a moment before some other titanic piece of news drops so we can actually know what the fuck we're talking about. And I'm sure somehow by the day this podcast comes out, some insane other thing will have happened that will make everything we're talking about today irrelevant, because that's what would have happened if we had recorded this any week prior. It would have immediately been out of date as soon as the podcast went up, because some other piece of massive news has been hitting basically every single week since mid-June.
Yeah, just so people know, we are recording this on Sunday, July 12th, about midday. And I'm going to try to turn this around as fast as I can for the exact reason you're talking about, Sean, because it's an up-to-date episode. But yeah, things could get out of date fast, so just know that is when we are recording this. And we will have a fun stuff segment at the end of the show.
Yep.
I've been playing the absolute motherfuck out of Street Fighter 6. I've gotten back into it. I've been playing all the DLC. I have a fighting stick now. It's been great. I've been going crazy with it. You've got a whole list of Super Robot Wars DLC to talk about that sounds like it's going to be the nerdiest segment ever.
Yep.
I think it's going to be a good one.
Yeah. So we'll take our medicine, talk about the madness of the news, and then we can have some fun. I've got a very fun top 10 list for our monthly 10. I'm very excited to talk about that is cursed, but in a way of things that don't actually exist, and so that's more fun than talk about the cursed reality we actually live in.
And I'll just say right now, for people who don't maybe get through the whole episode, we are planning another topic episode for July, probably next week, around Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey movie, where we want to talk about the new film, which is probably going to be, the biggest film of the year, and then also go back and look at the original text of not the original text, neither of us read Greek,
yes,
but a good translation of The Odyssey, and talk about the book and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, if people are curious, we'll specifically be looking at the Emily Wilson translation, which is the most recent kind of big translation of the Odyssey, and the one I had not read yet. And I'm
it's so good.
It's very, very good.
Yeah, it's if you've ever been intimidated by the Odyssey, it's the most It's so readable. It's a page turner. It's quick. It's not burdened with old timey language the way Fagles was that I had to read in high school. That kind of thing. It's so good.
Yes, yeah. So we'll be talking about both those, but we won't be talking about the horrible, no good, very bad TV miniseries about the Odyssey. We're not throwing that in because one, I didn't want to watch it, and two, it's not worth talking about.
All right. So, Sean, you want to go ahead and dive in to the video game apocalypse news?
Yeah. What's been going on in the news, Jonathan?
I've arranged everything here chronologically so we can relive this terrible month and make it a little time capsule. What was it like to live through this awful month? Let's start with an announcement that was half, exciting, new game, and then half, oh, this is a harbinger of things to come, isn't it? So
it was much more of a harbinger of things to come than we thought at the time. Like, it more immediately a harbinger than we realized.
So Grand Theft Auto 6 officially unveiled its release. It is coming to PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series S and X on November 19th for $80 for the standard version and $100 for the Ultimate Edition, which will include additional in-game shops and missions. But most notably, the game will not have a standard physical release. It will not release on a disc whatsoever. If you buy it at a retailer, it will be a download code in a box, not a disc, not even like an installer disc, the way Microsoft has shipped some Bethesda games in the last year and a half. I know Doom the Dark Ages did that, some other games. It's not even that, it's just a code in a box. This is an all-digital release. $80 is basically the highest we've seen for a AAA game. The other one that's done this is Mario Kart World. Xbox had announced that they were maybe going to move up to 80, and then they immediately moved that back when no one pre-ordered The Outer Worlds 2. So this is the next game to break that price point, which makes sense because this is like Mario Kart World, a sequel to one of the 5 highest-selling games of all time. So I guess if you're in the top 5, you can sell for $80. But yeah, I mean, the game is the game. It'll come out. We'll play it. Whatever. But no standard physical release for the biggest game possibly of all time. That felt like a harbinger of things to come, and I do not like it.
Yeah. So first, just talk about what is probably the least consequential, but would have been a bigger talking point.
Yes.
Initially, was the $80 thing, which, yeah, like I think we talked about on the podcast with Mario Kart World, of where it felt like, if I think Take-Two probably would have done this anyways, but if they weren't, if you're the people who make Grand Theft Auto, and you're like, well, if someone else is doing $80, how are we not also going to do $80? And it just turns out that The Outer Worlds 2 does not play in the same court as Mario Kart and Grand Theft Auto. And so, yeah, but I'm not like scandalized. I remember at the time when people didn't have 500 other things to talk about in video game news, there's a lot of discourse around the $80 thing. I think it's fine for Grand Theft Auto 6 to come out at that price point. Yeah, and then I don't even know how much we should talk about the code thing, because it feels like that's more wrapped up in the Sony news later. So yeah, let's leave that there and have the bigger physical digital discussion for the bigger part of that conversation.
So, and the thing about the $80 price point, I do think it's interesting though that Nintendo did rip the seal off with Mario Kart World. They have not done it again. They have not put it there are some Switch 2 releases of games that have like all the DLC that are priced at 80, but that's a different kind of thing. It's not a brand new game shipping at 80. So now it's just these two, and those are about the two biggest things you could do this with, is like new Mario Kart, new Grand Theft Auto. Call of Duty has not breached this. I'm very curious if this becomes more of a trend, or if it's just like there's a certain tier at which people will not question this, but there's everything else, it's going to feel awful,
Yeah, it is a question mark for more things down the line. Like, I do suspect that, like, Call of Duty, I wonder if, like, the hesitation around that is of going to $80 is, one, Call of Duty is not totally bulletproof, as we saw with the most recent Call of Duty. And two, if you're selling them to people every single year, I feel like that has a little bit of a different feel to the $80 price point than Mario Kart and Grand Theft Auto, that are very infrequent releases, which is one of the reasons why I think they are so titanically huge, is because you're not getting them all the time. And so all the pent-up demand for those franchises is all focused on a much tighter point, whereas Call of Duty has a lot more movement year to year on how well individual titles sell. They all sell incredibly well compared to the vast, vast majority of video games, but within the world of Call of Duty, it is not as kind of like monolithic as it would seem maybe from the outside.
Right, and honestly, even Mario Kart, that was bundled with the Switch 2, where you were paying basically $50 for it. So this is really the first big game that is testing this as like a fully standalone proposition. It's Grand Theft Auto. I don't think it's going to affect the sales really one iota, the $10 difference with a game this big. But yeah, I think it would for other games. So we'll keep an eye on that, as we always do. All right, so that was in June. Continuing in June, on June 25th, following the end of active development on Destiny 2, which we talked about last time, Bungie suffered brutal, sweeping layoffs with, and I'm quoting from Jason Schreier at Bloomberg here, most of the Destiny team, some people on the Marathon team, and even various Sony staff who supported Bungie laid off. We don't know the full number, but it totaled in the multiple hundreds. We got some data out of Washington State, which is where Bungie's headquarters are located, and it was multiple hundreds of people, but Bungie also has a lot of remote workers, so I don't know if it includes all of that. But it's a bummer, and it also means that, okay, they're definitely not working on a Destiny 3 in the background because they just laid off the whole team. I'm not sure what Bungie's doing now. Because it's not just Marathon. Again, Sony is not keeping them around just to make Marathon. Yeah. So this is a bummer.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of I feel like we talked about a lot of this on the last podcast where the layoffs had not happened at that point, but it was but we talked about that was Destiny 2 had officially announced that they were finishing the development or the ongoing support of that game. And yeah, it's just a tragedy what has happened with the studio. That it is Bungie just has struggled so much over the years, even though it was one of the most successful studios since 2001 with the release of Halo Combat Evolved. They continually struggled in so many different ways. And then, they got their independence from Microsoft, and then they had their long-term publishing deal with Activision just bounced out of that fairly early on, much earlier than their original contracts were about, because I think Activision saw that. I think, the reality for these kinds of games, something like a Destiny, is that supporting these sorts of live service games at that level of AAA quality is maybe not actually possible, because the games that do this are ones like a Genshin Impact or a Fortnite, Overwatch, something like that, which is not at the same kind of bleeding edge level of technology, right? I mean, those games are games that also run on mobile phones. Maybe not Overwatch, but Fortnite, obviously Genshin Impact, a lot of the very successful live service games, there are some that bridge that gap where they've got a little bit of that higher production value quality to it. But, Destiny always felt like it was trying to be a Halo, and it was also trying to be this new emerging style of game of live service. And it just feels like that is not, there's just been a lot of stories since this of how much Destiny struggled to actually have a ongoing profit. And it was something that could run itself, but it's not something that accrued profit for the studio because of the amount of cost of the continued development of that game. And it's just so sad that this is where we're at now with the studio.
It is. And I don't know what they do next. Are they... Because I just don't think another giant live service game like that is in the cards, kind of for anyone at this point.
Yeah.
I think they could be such a valuable developer to Sony as part of their staple of, great single-player games for PlayStation. But also, they've been doing Destiny for over a decade. Is there anyone still there, especially with these layoffs, who knows how to do that or wants to? It's what are they anymore is a big question. And this feels like a kind of beginning of the end thing. And I hope it's not, but it feels really bad.
Yeah, and it starts getting to that sort of ship of Theseus territory that a lot of Western game studios have, of at what point, who is there that was part of, that development legacy of the studio, how much of that institutional knowledge and that experience has left either, from leaving the studio over the years or in these series of big layoffs, with this being by far the biggest. There's this massive layoff that even if they try to spin up a new project, how do they do that if they do not have the people there that made Bungie what it was in the old days? And that's obviously the thing that's facing a lot of studios as well. We'll get to with all the Xbox stuff, but it's one of the consequences of these massive layoffs, that even if you staff up the studio again later, is that really still the same studio as it used to be if the people are not there?
Yeah. All right. Also on June 25th, Xbox announced massive price hikes for their hardware kicking in August 1st. This is the third price hike they've had in 13 months. The Xbox Series S at 512 gigabytes went from $400 to $500. It launched at $300, so this is a 66% increase since launch. The Xbox Series S with 1 terabyte went from $450 to $600. So you can buy a $600 Xbox Series S. What a world. That launched at $350, so that is a 71% increase. The Xbox Series X with 1 terabyte, but digital, no disk drive, went from $600 to $750. That launched at $450, so that's a 66% increase. And the Xbox Series X 1 terabyte with a disk drive, so like the original launch model, went from $650 to $800. It launched at $500 in 2020, so that is a 60% increase over time. And they just full-on discontinued the 2 terabyte Series X. For context, to put these numbers into the wider landscape, the PS5 is currently $650 with a disk drive, $600 without, $900 for the Pro. Like for like, that's about $150 less than the comparable Xbox models, but who knows how long that will last. This came the same week as a Circana report showing that amidst these price hikes, PS5 sales have lowered dramatically compared to this point last year. PS5 spending fell by 43%, and units dropped 58%, while Xbox had its worst May in terms of hardware units sold ever. Nintendo has been dominating the charts this year, leading to an overall raise in video game hardware spending year on year, because obviously 2025 we were, middle, late in the generation. This is a new generation for Nintendo. But Nintendo's price hikes, which are relatively modest compared to the competition, right now they're only planning on a $50 hike, don't kick in until September. And this was also the same week that Apple, who had been kind of the last holdout on doing any kind of price adjustments, finally gave into the pricing madness and did big across-the-board price hikes on all their products, iPads, Macs, all of that stuff, other than iPhones. Those are expected to jump up with the launch of the new phones in September. So it's bad. It's really bad. Sean, do you think someone should go out and spend $600 on an Xbox Series S?
No. No. I mean, it's particularly hard for Xbox because already the proposition for the console was very poor when you had the PlayStation right there. And obviously this is all just like the relative window of when people are doing which price hikes when. Like, I think it's very clear that Xbox was not in a position where, this was something they couldn't do, or it was an intentional strategy, but clearly they did not have as thorough long-term contracts as their competition, because they have just been so much more immediate on these price jumps. And Sony has been doing it as well, but doing it more gradually. Nintendo obviously also more gradually. But it is something where it's just, it almost feels silly at some point to be looking so much at the video game, of how this affects the video game consoles, because it's just such a massive thing, right? And the way in which AI has created this insane price hike, and the way that these memory companies are exploiting that to raise these prices to just absurd degrees, making buying anything that has this kind of technology in it getting more and more and more expensive, alongside like other things that are happening, like the war with Iran that is causing other kinds of price on other elements, and increases there. And it is so absurd. But you certainly see that, like, specifically the biggest one for these consoles is the memory and how hard that hits it. It's just like, it's very dramatic that they just said, now we just can't do the 2 terabyte Xbox Series X because it would be like $1,000 or something, because you can see how the price increases are not proportional with the amount of memory. Like, the more memory it is, the bigger the price jump is. And so it is just crazy. And it's where I'm sure the PS5 Pro is going to become absurdly expensive whenever the next price jump is, because remember, the Pro has 2 terabytes of memory in it. And so
it might not for long. They could change that.
They could end up saying, well, let's put one of those 1 terabyte drives from the PS5 in there and call it a day, because it's just absurd how expensive this stuff is. And especially this late in the generation, we've been having this conversation a lot over the past couple of years, of that it used to be that these consoles became dramatically cheaper. And by this point, you'd be paying $99 for a GameCube or whatever. And this is just the exact opposite of that trend. And so there's not a surprise that people are not going to go out and buy these consoles. I mean, you'd be crazy to. It makes no sense. If you would at this point, this late in the generation, if you are someone who is interested in buying a video game playing device, I mean, either obviously you could get the Switch 2 because that's new and that has not been affected by the price jumps too much yet. But if you're interested in getting a PlayStation or an Xbox, wait to see what the fuck the next generation consoles are going to be if that happens. Because buying one now just seems like a foolish thing to do.
Yeah, or buy used if you can find a decent price used. I don't know. I didn't put on the outline that the Steam Machine pricing was also finally unveiled, and it's out of control. It's over $1,000 for 500 gigabytes. It's $1,349 for 2 terabytes, which sucks because we also got reviews of that unit, and it seems like a great version of what it is for maybe $600 or $700, but not for $1,000. So and who knows when this stuff what will happen in the future with this? Like how will video game prices change? That is a question that I don't think anyone can actually reasonably answer. But like, where does this go, and what does for like further devices in the future? It's just crazy. It's absolutely insane. On June 30th, hot on the heels of IO Interactive revealing that they'd sold like 3 million copies of 007 First Light, which was the best-selling game. Yep, best-selling game of the year so far. Xbox has pulled out of a deal with that developer for their game Project Fantasy. IO commits to continuing development on their own or finding a new partner, but had to execute layoffs in the short term. In this case, like, understandably, if you don't have the money coming in for staff, there's kind of nothing you can do about it.
Keep in mind, 007 First Light is an indie game. So I'm hoping at the Game Awards, it's independently published, so they got to put it in the indie game category. That's where it belongs. That would be every bit as relevant as Clair Obscur winning last year. That was a fraud for Clair Obscur. I'm not saying anything about the quality of that game, but that is a fucking fraud. It would be just as much of a fraud for 007 to win. Yeah, 007. Some of my favorite indie games, 007 First Light, Baldur's Gate 3, just great little indie productions.
Yes. But anyway, this is obviously considered a harbinger of widely expected devastating layoffs and restructuring at Xbox, which we will talk about later. But just as a crumb of Xbox is not really thinking about the future at all, are they? Pulling out of a deal with the developer of the highest selling game of the year is a kind of madness that really foretells where they were going, huh?
Yeah, especially because, it just feels like IO has proved themselves so much over the past 10 years with the World of Assassination trilogy, which, started very kind of modest. And I know they struggled a lot with the original Hitman episodic releases in 2016, but that just steamrolled into this bigger thing as they released the further games and they got rolled into one big package. And that, game has been massively successful over time. And 007 First Light is a huge hit. I think really surpassed people's expectations pretty dramatically at launch, especially because, it reviewed very well. It did not have reviews out ahead of time. And so it was a very tight review window for developers or for reviewers of the game. But it reviewed really well. The word of mouth was great. It's an amazing game and it sold phenomenally well. And then, then a couple weeks later, Xbox is like, we got other shit we're doing. And they pulled all their money. And it makes me feel really bad for all the developers at IO that you can work so hard, put out a project that is so phenomenal and that the market responds really positively to. It's not just a great game, but a game that sells really great. And then one of a company that should be one of the main kind of stewards of the industry pulls all their funding of a project you're in the middle of working on. That is fucking bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, and this is going to be a through line throughout a lot of what we talk about today, which is that it really does not matter how well you are doing by any metric, critical, financial, anything. The layoffs are coming because this industry is dying. Speaking of this industry dying, Sony decided to stick the knife in its gut. On July 1st, Sony announced that they will be ending physical game disc production for all new games releasing on PlayStation consoles starting January 2028. Following this date, new games will be available on PlayStation Store and at retailers in digital formats only. This suggests long-standing expectations the PS6 will not have physical media capabilities and that they are still planning on a doomed quixotic 2027 launch. And now, I would very much note, opens Sony to the same lawsuits and legal challenges faced by people like Apple and Google in recent years, since they will now be selling a completely closed platform with a single point of digital access. So, hey, European Union, please go do your thing. This also came just days after hundreds of digital movies purchased on Sony platforms were permanently removed from users' accounts, reminding everyone that digital ownership means absolutely fucking nothing. Sean, I know at this point I use physical media for games more than you do, but I think you can completely agree. Whether you use digital media exclusively or you're all in on physical media, this is bad for everyone. This is just bad for absolutely everyone because it creates a monopoly on the platform. It will undoubtedly drive prices up. There's just no possible world in which that does not happen. It, obviously is terrible for game preservation. It's terrible for anyone who has slow internet or data caps on their internet, anyone who just likes buying games physically, anyone who has an existing library of physical games, who has a lot of discs lying around that they might want to take with them to the next Sony console that they probably will not be able to use. And I think, what feels most tone deaf of all about all of this is that Sony announced this on July 1st, with a 3-paragraph blog post. It is July 12th that they have said nothing else. They made no announcement about ways they might be improving their frankly awful digital storefront. They made no announcements about maybe new policies they could have to make the digital experience better, like a better return policy or some kind of digital game sale or lending program. They don't have anything like Nintendo's virtual game cards where you can easily give a game to a friend and get it back. It was just, we are taking this away from you. Nothing else is changing. Have fun. I think this is every single bit as tone-deaf and disastrous for them as the Xbox One announcement was in 2013 when Xbox was announcing their always-online shit. And in some ways even worse because no one even put their fucking face to this or talked to the press. This is one of the worst things Sony has ever done.
Yeah, I'm really curious what they're like, because obviously this is a thing that they're announcing is going to happen a year and a half from now, right? So January 2028, presumably that is timed with a PS6 launch. Who fucking knows? Maybe right now they think it is, and then they'll get there and be like, fuck. But yeah, it is like, you're right that there's kind of two layers here. There's the thing itself of saying we're canceling basically physical production of discs a year and a half from now. And again, presumably that then means that the PS6 will not have a disk drive, so on and so forth, because the only thing you'd use it for is backwards compatibility and Blu-rays for movies, I guess, if it did. But then there's also like the way that the announcement happened. It makes you wonder if they're like strategies to just try to piss people off now and then hope that just goes away over a year and a half or something by the time this actually happens.
Because that's how it works with gamers. Gamers, infamously, are very reasonable people who hear something and go, that's fine, and then forget about it.
Yes.
Short memories.
It is not a good way of handling this market, certainly. It makes, I think, the most that we can hope for is that there is something that they're trying to do, that they're developing on, that are features that would give you some of that, like you say, like simple things that some platforms like Steam have of refund capabilities that are simple and kind of foolproof in that, like, there's just here, it's for Steam's policy is that you can refund any game purchase within 2 hours. Once you've played more than 2 hours of the game, you can no longer refund it. So something like that, or some alternate form of game sharing, whatever. Like, the most we can hope is something like that happens. And then beyond that is that there needs to be, and this is beyond even just PlayStation stuff, but there just needs to be so much better regulation around digital purchases, digital goods, digital ownership. It is like this thing where policies, particularly the US, which just doesn't fucking do any of this shit ever, is so poor and is so behind the times with it. It's like this has been the reality of so many different kinds of goods for so long now. And that it's like, it's very sad that living in America, we have to be like, please EU, please do something to like make this better, and pass some kind of law that then trickles its way down to us, because our government it just refuses to regulate anything, unless it will somehow get money to the people running the government. Is the only time you can hope for any kind of regulation. It would probably be some sort of negative policy. And so, it is just this very sad state of affairs. I do have to say that at the same time, it isn't like, I both am kind of shocked by it, but I'm also not shocked by it, like, because it is this thing of where, like, I'll say that I personally haven't bought a game disc since the launch of the PS5, that I just like, there's something about the physical media for games that I think I've just kind of lost my interest in. And I'm not shocked that Sony is thinking, let's just, there's no benefit for consumers, and there's no benefit for the market that the consumers participate in. There's only negatives for us. For Sony and for game publishers, there's a huge financial incentive because of how much of a bigger cut they get from this stuff. And I think because physical in particular for video games has a lot of difficulties it encounters that other pieces of media don't, because it is hard to fit, for some games, all the data on there. Games are these weird living products where, some of the biggest games are ones that have basically nothing physical releases anyways, because you need to download most of the game once you put it in. It has been like such a kind of atrophied form of physical media for so long that at a certain point I kind of lost interest in it over the course of the PS4 generation. And so I think it is one of the things that has driven a lot of people to digital in video games, is because compared to like my personal buying habits have flipped on movies and games. It used to be that all my movie TV stuff I just streamed and then I bought physical games. And now, because I see so much more value both in being able to access specific things I want and also because the quality of watching it on a Blu-ray is better, I buy a lot of my movies, TV stuff physical now. And because I don't feel any personal benefit from the physical disc for games, I just stopped buying them.
And that's fine. But
yes.
like, no one in the pro physical media camp here is arguing that you shouldn't be able to do that, right? Nobody on my side of the aisle is saying Sean Chapman or whoever else who prefers it digitally shouldn't. Sometimes I prefer it digitally. There are certain games I like to have digitally so I can access them anytime without swapping a disc, but I like the choice. I'm kind of a penny pincher on games, and when it comes to sales, you can just get infinite, like, it's an exponential value more in sales on physical goods than on digital ones. Period, end of sentence. For anything that at least has a physical release, that is almost always going to be the case. My personal rule of thumb is that, like, I basically never, with the exception of a couple of, like, really high profile, my, like, favorite of favorite games, do not buy new games digitally full price. If I buy a new game full price, I will buy it physically, because I at least feel like I have a physical good there. If something goes wrong with it, I can replace it or return it. I can sell it later if I want to. I can lend it to a friend or my brother or someone like that. And I get a lot of value out of that. As well as just like I often do, because storage constraints are so heavy, I like having an installer just that's on a disc, and it makes it feel easier for me to just like go. Like the other day, I was going through my PS5 hard drive to delete some stuff, and I was like, oh, I have Demon Souls on there right now. Well, that's an easy delete because I have the disc sitting right there, and if I want to reinstall it, it'll take like 20 minutes just off of that disc, and that's nice and easy. And so, I like physical media for all of that stuff. And you're right that there are some games for which it makes absolutely no sense. You cannot sell Fortnite or Genshin Impact on a disc, but also no one's asking for that, right? Call of Duty doesn't really make sense on a disc, but that's fine. There are other games like, God of War Laufey is coming out. That's exactly the kind of game I have every God of War game on disc, because that's the kind of game that I sit down, I play the whole thing, and then I'm done with it, and I probably uninstall it for now, and if I want to go back to it, I have the disc right there. And there are still plenty of games like that. Over on the Nintendo side, you can get an even better benefit from this because games can run from the card, so you can save storage that way. But even then, I think Nintendo's solution this generation of the game key card, which is just a digital installer, that alone, if PlayStation had at least announced something like that as a ongoing solution of like, you could have it digitally, but still in the form of a physical good that you can resell, that you can own, that you can have some ownership of, that is at least better than codes in a box, which is just the most awful way of doing this. And then, there is all of the just, like on a principled level, on a legal level, I do not think this business model should be legal, that you can have a platform. And in fact, at various points in American history, this has not been legal. Right. People need to understand this. Like there is, if you go to film school, you learn about the 1948 Paramount Decree, which is when the Supreme Court of the United States declared that vertical integration in Hollywood was illegal, which was to say you had studios who made the movies and then owned the movie theaters in which those movies played and could block out competitors from putting their stuff in those theaters. And they decreed that was illegal. And so today, no one bats an eye at the fact that none of the movie theaters produce movies, right? You don't go to the Warner Brothers Theater to watch Superman. You go to AMC, which is a separate company that plays Warner Brothers movies, Disney movies. I was going to list the other companies, but they're now all part of the same company. Yeah. Anyway, A24, Neon, whatever you have, right? And that's good. That is a thing that has allowed movie theaters to thrive because I guarantee you, if you had single ownership, movie theater chains, Disney would probably be shutting those down to force you all onto Disney+. This is a good thing. And I think this is going to sound like a foreign concept, but it is bizarre from a antitrust perspective that you can buy a Sony platform and the only thing that they can sell to you is the Sony store. From an antitrust perspective, that's wrong. There should be other options at the very least. But like the fact that Sony is a game maker, they're a publisher of first-party games, they're the console manufacturer, and they control the only digital access through the store to that console. Those are really three functions that should be three different companies if you're being a purist about antitrust on this level. Now, maybe we don't want to be a purist because I can imagine it getting, too complicated in some forms. But at the very least, there needs to be some kind of digital competition on there. How bizarre would it be if you launched your Mac or your Windows PC and the only way to put apps on it was one store? We've put up with that on like our phones and our consoles because that's just the way it's been with that hardware, but it's weird and it's wrong. And that is still the problem here. And the only saving grace that video game consoles have had from all of this is that you've had physical media. So if you don't want to give your money directly to Sony through their digital store, you could go to Best Buy or GameStop or Amazon or some other seller, or you could buy it used, or you could lend it from a friend, and that gave you choice. And that choice is good. And this is a giant blow to that. And I think as bad as this sounds, I think we're almost too complacent in talking about it because really the headline here is not Sony announces the end of disc, production. It's Sony announces the end of game ownership on PlayStation because that's what selling only digital goods means. It means the end of any kind of ownership over that good. And I think that is really, really bad. And I think that on a principled level above and beyond just Sony or video games. I think that on like a broad legal level for everything.
Yeah, and it's what I was saying with like the EU and like how this should function is there needs to be a broader suite of regulations around the ability to own digital goods because it's so much of what we consume these days. And beyond video games, music, like apps, movie, TV show, whatever. And all of it is filtered through these monopolistic systems that the companies that create the stuff then also create the means of the distribution and whatever products that you're buying from them. And there's a reason why this is like how these companies have been pushing this for so long and are motivated in many ways to have like the physical good be atrophied over time, which is what has happened with physical goods for video games is because they get this huge financial incentive. Because if from Sony's perspective, when they do this, they then now control the only means with which you can buy these games. You can only buy them through their store. They now no longer have to pay money for the manufacturing of the discs. They no longer have to pay money for the distribution of the discs. And they no longer have to pay the cut for retailers who sell those discs that need their money. They get so much more money from any individual digital purchase, but it's also true of other video game publishers that publish their goods on Sony's console because they're part of them having to pay for distribution, manufacturing, and the retail store cut is also cut out. And so they're so financially incentivized to do this that it kind of, in the current system, has become inevitable that this would occur because they're allowed to get away with it. And it's where there just needs to be such better regulation around these sorts of things. Because it's where this is going to go. Like Microsoft is obviously going to do this. Microsoft has almost like kind of half done this. So much of their like Xbox Game Studio games typically do not launch on discs anymore. Like they have sort of soft moved in this direction. Nintendo obviously gets a much bigger overall proportion of their sales through physical now, but we're already seeing with the Switch 2, with stuff like the game keycard, them having to find ways to figure out a way for even physical to continue to exist on the Switch 2 because of the higher demands of physical goods for this medium that just faces specific challenges that other kinds of things don't. And so it just becomes very frustrating that it feels like these companies are able to do this and that there's nothing standing in their way really. And the most we can get is pray for the EU to come in. The EU senpai, please, come pass some more regulation, please.
I also want to push back, though, on the numbers about physical versus digital sales are complete bullshit when you hear it from the big publishers and console manufacturers. The number you hear is it's 90% digital sales. And that tells you so little of the story. Because, one, there is so much more in the PlayStation Store than is sold on disc, or in the Xbox Store than is sold on disc. So if you're putting everything together, it's an unfair comparison. You have to go like for like. You have to go with games that have a physical release and a digital release and make that comparison, and it becomes a lot more even at that point. We know from the big Sony leak a couple years ago where we got Wolverine was leaked and the Insomniac plans were leaked, that a lot of Sony's first-party games sell really high value and numbers on physical media. We know that for other manufacturers it is this way. And it is more digital now, yes, but it is a significant part of the market that you do not want to lose. And I think Sony's hope is that people who are, sticklers about physical media still will just make that jump over. But I don't know if that's true for everyone. I can just say for myself, I am not buying a PS6 that has only digital access for games. I'm not doing that. Just period. If I want to do that, I will go play on PC. I've been using Steam a little bit this last week because I've been playing around with a PC that my brother lent me because there's some stuff I wanted to do on there. And it amazes me. If your primary way of buying digital games is PlayStation, that is such a shitty experience. It is such an awful storefront. It is such an awful back end. All of it sucks. And when you go and use Steam for 5 minutes, it feels like a product from the future, where it is so much easier to just put in your credit card information and see all of your games. And, everything you've ever bought on Steam is still here because it doesn't cut you off at this generation or something like that. And it is... they could at least be making announcements of we're making all these improvements to the store or something like that. Because at least if you go on PC and you buy digitally, one, there's places where you can get them DRM free in some cases. And two, storefronts like Steam are just so much more consumer friendly than console experiences. And, if consoles are going to cost $1,000 plus anyway, good riddance. I'm fine playing on a different platform if this is how you have to buy your games.
Sure. I mean, because obviously, the PC has been in the all digital world since the early 2010s, really. I mean, I'm sure that there are still technically a couple of things that have trickled out. But it was a big controversy in 2004 with Steam that the only real way you could play Half-Life 2 is by having Steam on. You could buy a disc version of Half-Life 2, but it was just an install and you had to have Steam running to still play the game. And it was a bit of a fight on PC to eventually move to the kind of all digital landscape. Obviously, the big advantage with PC, as you say, is that it is an open platform. And so you have, it's the exact thing we were saying that needs to happen on these other places, is the ability for alternative storefronts to exist. Now, PC gamers love to kick and scream anytime that happens. And they're like, why is all this stuff not available on Steam also?
But even then, there's you can go buy keys from places that sell them cheaper and stuff like that. It's more than just using different storefronts. There's a lot of ways that competition is bred in that landscape, even if you're just using Steam.
Yeah, and then obviously there's just the sort of inevitable, kind of trampoline under you if you want to jump there in PC, which is, fuck you can just get an executable of that game. Not all of them are going to run because of anti-cheat stuff and Nuvo or what have you or whatever's. But there are open seas on the PC that you can engage in if you want to. And so I think people on that platform really deep down don't actually care about the ability to quote unquote own games through a store. because for the vast majority of the games, you can own that game DRM free if you really, really wanted to.
Right, but my point is there's all these other advantages, right? Sure. Like infamously, Steam has way more sales than any other digital store. Like if you go with Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, their storefronts on their consoles, they're never going to have the amount or depth or like price reductions in sales as you get on the PC. It's crazy. So we can leave it at that. But it's I hate this. It bums me the hell out. And I just, based on my experience playing Sony consoles the last couple generations, my trust that they will make a better experience out of this to try to compensate is very low. I really have a hard time believing that they will do that. And it would be nice to see them make some kind of effort. But again, it's been 2 weeks since they made this announcement, and there has been no other public communication. I don't know how more you can send a fuck you to players than that.
Yeah, I'm very curious where all this goes. Because one other element of this I'm curious about is how much of this is something they would have done anyways versus how much of this is something that the increasing price of all the consoles and the materials motivates them to try to restrict and focus on milking the most valuable consumers that they have, which is their digital consumers, and them just sort of trying to batten down the hatches. Like I just would be, it'd be fascinating to have a book of someone who is in the room, right? Like what the fuck is happening with these, because I think it's clear that this was probably something that was in contention within Sony for some amount of time, because there has been, from, insiders that are fairly reputable, there has been a lot of like kind of conflicting information on the, like, will it have a disk drive that's like the detachable disk drive thing like the PS5 has done? And that was like a thing that several reputable insiders are talking about for a while. And then it seemed like it was like, maybe it won't have it. So it's something I'm very curious at what stage has this become the decision that they made for the future? Because I think it was something that they would do eventually anyways. But it does feel like it happened sooner than I would have expected.
Yeah, and I'm curious, like, in terms of, like, the whales, the people who, like, spend the most on the platform, I would assume a lot of those are physical media diehards. Now, you have a lot of other people who probably your biggest whales are people spending a lot on, like, battle passes and stuff in Fortnite and whatnot. But, like, at that point, I mean, why are you even developing first-party games? So there's a lot here that is, like, a question for me. But the other related thing is that on the same day, this is the most tone-deaf part of all of this, is on the same day, July 1st, Sony announced that they will be closing the PlayStation Store on PS3 and Vita, reminding you that one day you will no longer be able to buy anything on these consoles anyway, and they're going to shut all that off. So in Mexico, Honduras, and Nicaragua, the PlayStation Store on the PS3 will close in August. Additional Latin American and Middle Eastern countries unspecified, it'll close in late 2026. And in all other countries, the PS Store on PS3 and Vita will close in July 2027. They do at least confirm that players will still be able to download previously purchased content after the closing date for the foreseeable future, which is good. I would love to know what commitment they mean by foreseeable future. But this is a bummer because the PS3 and Vita generation hosted so much stuff that has never come forward. One big one is they have a lot of classic PS1, PS2, and PSP games that have never been made available on the PS4 or PS5, including like a lot of games that you can, buy for $5 on that store that physically are really scarce at this point and go for $100, $200. They also obviously had a lot of digital-only titles, the most famous one probably being Tokyo Jungle, a gift from God that I cannot believe has never been remastered. And those never made the transition due to lack of backwards compatibility. Remember that the PS3 to 4 was a hard break where nothing from the PS3 worked on the 4, and then everything since then has carried forward. But we've never really made up for that hard break. And I'd actually been meaning to pick up a used PS3 for a while, because I did sell my PS3 at some point during the PS4 generation, and I later regretted it because of just how much stuff I still had that I could only play there. And I found a really good of the super slim model, the one with the top loader, which I was kind of looking for because I assumed that one is less prone to failure because it's not a physical moving piece of parts to get the disc in and out. And I found one for $80, and I picked that up, and I've been going back and re-downloading stuff and buying some stuff that I never picked up that I wanted to own on PS3. And it's been kind of fun and nostalgic. It's also been like, oh god, I forgot how bad Sony was in that generation at all their digital stuff. Do you remember, Sean, that this PS3 store, you had to search letter by letter? Yes. You couldn't type in a term. You had to go, like, if you wanted to search for God of War, you would type G, and then it would only provide you the letters of stuff in the store that started with G. So then you could, like, just pick O, and then it would narrow that down, and then you could pick D, and it was like a guessing game to get to the game you wanted to find. It's miserable. The biggest thing I had forgotten about is that they don't download the updated versions of the game to your console. They download the 1.0 versions, and then you have to go in and update everything up to whatever the most recent is. So all of that is not particularly fun, but I am glad to have my PS3 with all that stuff on it, same with my Vita, and just have that preserved, because there is a good amount of stuff that you can only play there, and it's a nice little device to have for that. So anyone else who still has those systems, I would download anything you want while you still can.
Yeah. Hey, if you got a Vita, actually, I'm pretty sure this is true of the PS3 as well. Hey, those things are fucking easy to jailbreak, and you have no reason to be worried about it with this. It's the same thing when I got my new Nintendo 2DS XL or whatever, right when the 3DS store was shutting down. I'm like, hey, I could buy this and jailbreak. Don't give a fuck.
Yes.
Because they don't care anymore. They're not allowing people to buy new stuff on it. Having a jailbroken Vita is nice because you can also then just put SD cards in that bitch. And you don't have to worry about getting their proprietary memory cards. Yeah, this does suck. It was something that they had tried to do this several years ago, and then there was enough of an outcry about it that they postponed that. And it's my personal, like, insane, no way this is true conspiracy theory, but it's something I like to think about. It's like, maybe the whole reason they're canceling discs is just to create such a big shitstorm that nobody cared about this, so they can finally say, we've been trying to shut this bitch down for years, and every time we try, people throw a fit about it, and so now let's make you really pissed off about something else, and then in the cover of that, we can finally shut down the PS3 Vita store. Because I just didn't see almost anyone talk about this, and it had regularly, like, summoned huge campaigns of people online to prevent this exact thing from happening the other times they have tried it, and I think most people either didn't see this news because it was so much covered up by the other thing, or if they did, they were so emotional about the disc stuff that they didn't have the energy to put into caring about the shutting down of this store.
And it's also been a reminder for me, by the way, of just because I've been picking up some PS3 discs of things that I can only play there, and it's like, this is great. It's like a marketplace where I can just go find used discs of stuff and it'll work, and I don't have to worry about all this. It's nice. But also, like, Sony needs to do a better job of bringing some of this stuff forward. Sean, there are 5 whole God of War games exclusive to this generation that have never come. While God of War is like one of their biggest franchises, there is God of War 1 and 2, there is Ascension, the PS3 only one, and then there are the 2 PSP games. All of those are playable on PS3. None of them have come to the 4 or 5. That's nuts. That is absolute madness. When you have God of War as one of your biggest franchises, it's hard for me to imagine anyone else like letting that kind of stuff just sit by the wayside. And yet, if you don't have an earlier Sony console, there's a lot of parts of their history that have just been completely blocked off on their current platform, and that's madness to me.
Yeah, there's definitely one of, like, the profound sins of the PS3 era is this just it is this weird wall it created. Some of it is there are technical ones for specific titles, like, Metal Gear Solid 4 is just now getting its first release. There's, obviously complicated technical stuff there. But other ones is stuff like a God of War, where, obviously they could, and maybe they do. Like, I have not looked at what is available on the PS1, PS2 classic stuff. Like, they do have a lot of stuff there. I haven't looked at it recently. But the sense of, like, they did their PS3 kind of remasters of God of War 1 and 2. And so even if you could do a PS2 classics version of it on the modern PlayStation store, you're not going to get that, like, the PS3 remaster version. And so that just sort of the PS3 generation is just such a weird, like, island floating on its own. That wasn't,
I guess, but I don't really buy that. God of War God of War 3 got a PS4 version. I don't really buy that they can. These are smart people.
Sure,
they've got all the money in the world.
But it creates probably just enough of a financial hurdle that their arguments for them to make to not do it. Obviously, I would want them to do it. But it just has created this weird scenario where it feels like it is this just like floating generation that is not quite the like full old school PS2 era, not quite the PS4 era, and it just is like created this weird wall in the history of the PlayStation consoles, you know?
Yeah. But I mean, the Metal Gear Solid Gold Collection that came out a couple years ago, that's just ports of the PS3 HD versions of those games, and actually they ran worse initially than they did on, I think they've patched that since. But yeah, but that's, anyway. All right, that's enough with Sony. Let's move on to Xbox. On Monday, July 6th, we learned that Xbox is executing a plan for 3,200 layoffs, around 20% of the total staff of Xbox. 1,600 were occurring immediately this week, and another 1,600 will occur over the next 12 months as a brutal sword of Damocles hangs over the entire staff at Xbox. They will also be parting ways with 5 studios, and these numbers are included in those technically layoff figures, but these people still, for now, do have their jobs, luckily. Ninja Theory and Undead Labs are being sold to undisclosed buyers and will continue working on their current games, Senua and The New State of Decay, respectively. Compulsion and Double Fine are being spun out to independent private ownership under their founders, with some runway funding from Xbox and full ownership of their IP. So, like, Double Fine will still hold on to Psychonauts. And Arcane is entering a consultation process to either sell or spin off the studio, but this process is moving slower due to stricter and more sane labor laws in France, where you can't just say, you're all fired. Good on you, French people. Additional details of the Xbox layoffs from Jason Schreier at Bloomberg. ZeniMax will face a significant overhaul and will pivot to focus on its biggest franchises, Fallout, The Elder Scrolls, Doom, Quake, and Wolfenstein. This includes deep cuts at id Software, including speculation that Xbox is forcing an abandonment of the id Tech engine. id themselves has publicly refuted this and stated that layoffs were spread across teams, leaving them still with the crew we need to build the games and tech we're known for. They note that their current size post-layoffs is about the size as when they made Doom 2016. Obsidian, also deeply affected. They lost about a quarter of their workforce, and they are also apparently tasked with creating a new Fallout game while putting the sequel to their game Avowed on the back burner, or possibly canceled altogether, although Jason Schreier on YouTube later reported that a small team is still playing with that Avowed sequel, which is further along than expected. I think they're kind of hoping they can get it into a state where it makes more financial sense to release it than to can it, although with Microsoft these days, I think that might be a fool's errand. All reporting indicates Microsoft wants to focus more on franchises, and as a result, divisions that once operated independently will now be reporting directly to Asha Sharma, the CEO. This includes Minecraft creators Mojang and the Candy Crush crew at King, and apparent efforts to wrest unitary control over franchises like Fallout and Elder Scrolls from Bethesda to allow more releases in those series. Asha Sharma, in a letter announcing those layoffs, said, quote, I want Xbox to be one of the few companies that entertains more than 1 billion people each day. For the record, that would be 1/8 of the population of Earth for a platform that has 30 million consoles in the wild. Days later, she is one of 3 people named to a new Federal Reserve task force on, quote, productivity and jobs to, quote, assess the economic impact of new general-purpose technologies, including AI, to inform the Fed's policy judgments. We live in hell.
Yeah, it's not good. And this doesn't even capture the thing of like the feeling of the weeks leading up to this, of the like, it was, like knowing that an earthquake happened and that the tsunami is coming, that there's just this, all these reports coming out from people with sources at these different studios about like these layoffs are coming. They're going to be like huge. Multiple studios are in talks that they'll either be shut down or they need to be spun off and all this stuff. And it was just this crazy couple of weeks of video game news that certainly would have made it impossible to do it purely academic. It's like, it's just like the rolling nature of this just created this, just crazy
the worst
atmosphere.
one was was when we learned, literally 3 days after the showcase, that they had done that big trailer for Senua, the new Hellblade game, and we learned that they were planning to get rid of Ninja Theory. Like, and again, this was like hours after that showcase. Just, that's the kind of environment we were in, where they were announcing games from teams they were planning to either lay off or spin off.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, it is definitely a relief to start with. Like, the only thing that's sort of a little bit of a silver lining to this news is that those studios have not been totally shut down. Now, you know, it is a big question mark about what condition will these studios be in for the foreseeable future, right? Like, are they going to be saddled with certain amounts of debt from this? Like, things like that is a thing that I think we don't have full kind of knowledge or understanding of. Obviously, we don't know who the buyers are for Ninja Theory and Undead Labs. Like, hopefully they go to a company that gives a shit about video game stuff, because there are a lot of companies in this space that like to buy game developers and shut them down before releasing any games.
I would love if it was someone good. I am guessing it is some kind of Saudi money, is my guess, based on how everything has been going and how in bed Microsoft is with that. I would not be surprised if this is some, like, Saudi hedge fund.
Yeah, you know, it's like, who knows what the condition of those studios will be, but it's certainly at least better that there's a bit of hope for them here, rather than just being completely shut down by Microsoft immediately. You know, I think it is notable that they are, like, sort of feels like they're just sort of walking back the Phil Spencer era of Xbox in this very specific way, that all of these studios are part of that initial wave of acquisitions that happened like in 2018-ish, that they announced at that big E3. And I think the only one from that they are not now letting go of is Playground Games, which obviously was kind of an Xbox studio in the sense that they were making Xbox games with Forza, but they didn't own them yet. But they were part of that with, like, companies like Ninja Theory and Undead Labs, Compulsion, which at that point was just known for the We Happy Few, the early access version of that game. That was their initial round of, like, hey, we care about games again. Fuck all this TV bullshit we were talking about forever with the Xbox One. We're going to buy a bunch of studios. And then obviously that then accelerated to them buying ZeniMax, and then accelerated to an insane degree when they decided to buy Activision, or Activision swallowed up Xbox, depending on how you look at that equation and how that worked out. But it is them, obviously, you know, they're letting go of the kind of smaller profile, more niche studios, the ones that work on games that are very beloved, but are not the, like, 10 million sellers. I mean, well, Xbox only has 10 million seller left in its Forza Horizon, you know, but that's, and obviously Minecraft and stuff like that, which they kind of manage in other places, or Call of Duty. But it is such a fucking bullshit experience that all these studios went through, because the whole thing originally was that these acquisitions came with the pitch of Game Pass. They were, like, inextricably tied to Game Pass as an entire concept. And so Xbox specifically went out to buy smaller studios that had passionate fan bases, like Double Fine, Undead Labs, Ninja Theory, and Compulsion at that time, which was hot because there's a lot of interest in the We Happy Few project. And they bought those games that were smaller studios with the idea of, we need a lot of content on Game Pass to make a Game Pass a viable business model, and it's going to be the thing that we hitch our entire company to, because at that time, before AI was a thing, Satya Nadella was all in on the subscription model thing, and he had, you know, made Microsoft Office a terrible product by turning it into a subscription thing that made them shit tons of money. He is now no longer gives a shit about any of that stuff, because he's all in on AI, which is also killing his company in a different way. And it is just like, to be these companies that make these beloved small-scale titles that were becoming more difficult to finance over the years in the video game industry, buy them up and tell them, hey, you don't need to make the multi-million seller hits. You need to put out content that brings value to Game Pass, and it doesn't we're not buying you so that your games sell a lot. That wasn't the point. And they were specifically instructed that, and there's lots of reporting about this, that was like their mission statement, was to create games that were beloved, not games that sold a lot, because that wasn't the business model that Microsoft was chasing at that point. And then that's what all these studios did. And then it feels like these studios are all being let go of, specifically because they're making games that aren't big sellers. And it's just like, well, they weren't trying to, they weren't told to, that wasn't what they were here to do. And it's just like Xbox, you know, cutting them loose like this, which even if the studios are not shut down, I'm sure that there is now, so much stress. And it must be just a fucking nightmare to be working at those companies right now to deal with the reality of that you used to be part of this big organization that gave you certain protections, and now you are either an independently owned company or you're bought up by God knows who or what. And it's one of those things of that Xbox's strategy and the Game Pass era and all that has just sort of, it was always a thing I was skeptical of, but it has soured and sort of turned in this way that is very grotesque because of what Asha Sharma is doing here.
It's bad. And if I take a step back and look at this as a whole, holistically, this does not look like a company preparing for any kind of long-term future. This does not look like a company trying to pitch, this is how we're successful for the next 10 years. You would not be laying off the fucking id Tech team if you were doing that.
Yeah.
You would not be laying off people at Obsidian who have been your most loyal, they have gotten out. They've been basically the Insomniac of Xbox lately in terms of the amount of games they've been getting out. I 99.9% sure to my bones, this looks to me like they are prepping a sale of Xbox. I don't know I don't know who is in a position to buy Xbox, but this is basically the exact game plan we saw from David Zaslav over at Warner Brothers, which we learned recently was all a build-up to selling Warner Brothers. Now that is leading to the Paramount sale/merger. And if you remember, the David Zaslav reign of terror included, canceling finished movies for tax write-offs. It was mass layoffs. It was downsizing in places where you would go, there is so much value in this place. Why would you be doing that? And it was all basically to to drown the company to a point where it could be in a bundle that they could sell it to someone else. And that's what this looks like, because none of this is something that I think you could credibly say sets you up for success in the long term. You cannot be saying, we want 1 billion people using our fucking products while you are laying off 1/5 of your entire staff. Yeah. You cannot be saying, we're going to have 1 billion players while getting rid of all of the most promising parts of your company. You cannot pretend that you want to grow and become more of a platform if you are laying off the people who are your best, technological bread and butter, which I would say is id over at id Tech, who frankly should be tripled in size so that id Tech could become a competitor to Unreal or something. That's what you would be. That's the kind of investment you would be making if you're planning for the future. This is not I do not think Asha Sharma is there. I think now we can say this pretty clearly. She is not there to lead Xbox into the future. She is there to burn down the house for the insurance money, and that is what we are seeing. And I think everyone just needs to be prepared for that. I do not think Microsoft wants Xbox anymore, and I think this is a plan to get it into a position where they can offload it one way or another. That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, I mean, you're very right in that they are trying to cut off all of the extra branches and bringing everything, that all that stuff about Minecraft and Candy Crush and all this into this sort of the central trunk and make that here's the thing that we're going to try to sell. But as you say, if that's what they're trying to do, who in their right mind, what company would be looking to buy fucking Xbox right now? It would be, madness. It would be an insane thing to attempt to do. And it just leaves all these fucking, incredibly talented people in the lurch in the process. I mean, it's when you think about the numbers we're talking about here of 1,600 people laid off now, it's 1,600, 1,600 is an insane number. And then there's an additional 1,600 that have to sit around more than that. There's several thousands of people having to sit around wondering, am I part of the next 1,600 people being laid off? I obviously was in my jobs, with my first to teaching job that I can only say is a first to teaching job because I was part of the group that was laid off there, involved in COVID causing a reduced amount of students attending the school. And so we got less funding. And there was I think about 10 something people that were laid off from the teaching staff. And I happened to be one of them there. And then also in the school year I just finished, there was all this stuff around, multiple people being laid off from every single department. Our English department managed to get through that where we had a couple people retiring anyway, so we didn't lose anyone from being fired or laid off. But in that situation, it's very real that it dramatically affects your morale, your ability to do your job, your mental health, to be there thinking about, am I going to be laid off? Are my buddies going to be laid off? These people I'm working with every single day, for this, like, by this kind of faceless entity up at the top that is working in a fashion that just is not how reality is, on like assumptions of things that aren't real. And it's like, I'm just, my heart breaks for all these people who are working so hard in what are often just these very thankless jobs, or at least thankless from the perspective of the people that own them and own their companies. And just having to try to continue to make games in this condition, being like the people at Obsidian continuing to work on Avowed 2 because they're now being forced to work on a Fallout thing that's not far enough in production for those people to be able to work on it. So they're working on a game that's technically canceled in the hopes that it will be uncanceled, knowing that there's going to be over 1,000 more people laid off at some point. It's just fucking insane. And it's such a heartless thing to happen and to just continue to happen in this industry. As you say, for what feels like this kind of brutal strategy from the top to try to just sort of thin everything out so they can try to sell it to someone.
Yeah. I mean, let's play a game here, Sean, and let's try to put in context just how incoherent the last month at Xbox has been, right? So here's the message. Big Xbox Game Showcase. We've got all these games coming out. They're all coming to Game Pass, and they're all also coming to PS5, except for these 2 games that are only going to be on Xbox and PC. But we're also announcing that the Xbox is going up in price by $150. So if you don't already have an Xbox, it's going to cost you $800 to play Gears of War E-Day, and whatever that other one that no one really remembers is also a console exclusive. But at the same time, we're spinning off or laying off the people who made several of the games you saw us on that showcase, so they might not be coming out at all. They might not be coming to Game Pass because they're no longer contractually obligated to do that, even though we announced it for Game Pass. And we're laying off a fifth of the company, and we're getting rid of all these people, and also we want 1 billion players.
Yeah, we want 1 billion players every day, and also now, if I was someone who's a big fan of Minecraft, I would personally be very concerned about the news of, and I'm bringing Minecraft under my direct control, and we're bringing them into this house over here where I just shat on everything else. It's like, yeah, it is like, it is madness. It's very true that it is this weird ping-ponging back and forth. It makes me think almost whimsically for a couple of months ago where I just could make fun of people online who were somehow optimistic about Asha Sharma because she did a Twitter poll that was like, if we're bringing Xbox back, but should it be capital X Xbox or all caps Xbox? And like, yeah, and they did like a message board, an official Microsoft message board for Xbox. That if you have any like feedback, write it up here. It's like, but they're making some moves, Jonathan. They're making some moves over at Xbox. It's like, yeah, they're making some moves to try to fucking burn their company down and sell the ashes to someone. They are making lots of moves. It's just maybe they're not ones that are going to benefit anyone who's interested in the hobby of video games.
Yeah, I saw someone say online, and I think this is so true, this kind of thing should be understood as class warfare. Class warfare is a thing that you only hear from Fox News when it's Democrats saying we should tax the rich 1% more. But this is what actual class warfare looks like. It is also psychological torment to the people who still work there and have been laid off. But it is also like, I find something very psychologically scarring about looking at these powerful, wealthy people who get to so flagrantly be so bad at their jobs, right? Mm-hmm. Like, think about that string of incoherence I just walked us through, and then think about whatever you do for a living. And think about if you went into the office and said something that incoherent. Like for me, if I went in and said, all right, in this film class, we're not going to be watching any movies. We're only going to be reading books, but the tests are all going to be on movies based on those books. But you got to go find the movies. But the tests will also be in French. If you actually do speak French, it's going to be given to you in Italian. Like if I did something like that, like just completely lost my fucking mind incoherent, I would correctly be fired. I would no longer be employed by the University of Colorado. But if you do something equally incoherent when you're a fucking millionaire or billionaire working in the C-suite, you get fat stock options while you lay people off. It is the kind of thing that makes you want to go do a French Revolution. It's the kind of thing that makes you understand, okay, intellectually, I know the Reign of Terror was bad, but I emotionally understand how the people fucking got there, because this is so evil.
Yeah, it is just the sense of being ruled over by these sociopaths, who, especially with Asha Sharma, who, is like flagrantly not someone, in the Zaslav model, not someone who gives a flying fuck about the company she's in charge of, doesn't know anything about video games, about like software and, any of the stuff that is involved with this industry. Which is actually fairly unusual in video games. Like, most CEOs of video game companies are people who are like part of this industry, or at least part of like the closely related like hardware technical industry, and not like AI or whatever, but like the more kind of hardcore stuff. That's like what this current Sony CEO guy is from. That's like, at least there are people that are part of this world. And it's not someone that's just come from outside who is there to play their CEO games, and shit on everything and burn it down. And you're just staring at it, just befuddled, because it is like if someone just brought a person into the classroom who, one, didn't have a teaching license, and two, didn't pass the tests that you need to take to get a teaching license. Three, didn't have a degree in the subject matter in which they're supposed to be teaching. And three, for like English, they'd never read a book before, but they're very confident that they can tell you everything you need to know about the English language and grammar and analyzing fiction. And you're just staring at this like, what is this person doing? And then someone hands them, a case of gold bars, basically. It's like, here you go. It's like, have a great day. And then you're on the street without a job. You're like, what happened? Like, how did I end up here? What the fuck is going on?
I mean, you really do have to think of the psychological profile of someone who willingly takes a job where her job is to go in there and be the bad guy. Her job is to go in there and hurt people and fire people and hurt the organization. And I just don't know how you go home and sleep at night. It is so alien to me. It is so foreign to me. I can't make that cognitive, empathetic leap to what that kind of person is.
Yeah, it's a horrifying world we live in, Jonathan.
But just one last bit of news here to remember that not all of this shit is on Asha Sharma's hands. There's plenty to go around. I want to give a little candy for us, Sean. Here's our dessert.
Yeah.
In Bloomberg this week, Cecilia de Anastasio reported that Xbox had, quote, spent nearly $80 billion, with a B, dollars in the last decade on deals that would give it popular video game titles like Call of Duty and Skyrim, betting that gamers would flock to its Netflix-like subscription service offering hundreds of options for endless play. Not quoting any longer, but when Game Pass launched in 2017, the goal they set was 77 million subs by fiscal year 2026, which just ended this June. And at the end of this June, we were at an official count of 30 million subs, itself a drop of 4 million since the last report in 2024. Here's an amazing paragraph. Call of Duty, for example, cost $70 before it landed on Game Pass, where for less than half the price, players could access that game and hundreds of others. In 2024, Xbox gave up more than $300 million in sales of Call of Duty on Xbox consoles and PCs, a person familiar with the matter told Bloomberg last year. Instead, PlayStation accounted for 82% of Call of Duty Black Ops 6 sales that year. Just to explain, this is me talking now, how insane the Game Pass targets were. Netflix is the most popular streaming service worldwide. It has 325 million paid subscribers, but that is a unicorn. That is about 3 times more than what second place is, which is Disney Plus with the 125 million subs. But if you go to the bottom of that list, you have like the lowest subscribed streamers for video are stuff like Peacock at 41 million or Apple TV with 45 million. So even the lower end of the range was far beyond anything Game Pass ever approached. A goal of 77 million would have put it around Paramount Plus, but below HBO Max and Disney. This company was run by lunatics for so long. This is, when you read this, it's like watching a toddler with a steak knife crawling around on the ground. Like, this is the wrong thing in the wrong person's hands. What were these people doing?
Yeah, and it's all so frustrating. It just like makes me think back to, like I've always kind of vocally on the podcast going back to when Game Pass was a new thing, been like, I don't think this makes any sense. Like, it's just, Game Pass always seemed like madness. That was a service that just, from my perspective, never really could square with the reality of what video games are, how people play them, things like that. And in terms of, to be clear, with Game Pass, like the problem is this idea of it needs to be 77 million and then 100 million subscribers and so on and so forth. You can have subscription services in games. That's fine. PlayStation has one. Nintendo has one. There are different PC services that do this. And that's fine. But what they're not trying to do is they're not putting their whole company on the idea of this is what it is. It's not we're selling video games and we have a supplemental subscription service. It is we are this subscription service, and sometimes maybe people will buy some video games too, is kind of what Xbox was pitching it as. And it always just seemed like madness. And if you can indulge it a little bit, if I told you so, like this is like that moment where I just think back to the years of me seeing this discourse online of people trying to point out that, like, logically, Game Pass as a service with these kinds of goals and what they're doing with, like, the day one games, like, that version of it is not a thing that can possibly sustain itself. It makes absolutely no sense. It's going to burn itself out as soon as Microsoft realizes that they can't keep fucking throwing money at this, like, bottomless well of Game Pass. And here we are, unfortunately, 2026, and it's true. Like, it wasn't sustainable. It didn't make sense. It was a mad fucking play, like, made to try to satisfy a mad king at the time, Satya Nadella, who, again, in 2017 was all big on this fucking subscription shit, and that was, like, everything he cared about. Now he doesn't give a shit about it, because something else came around to distract the Mad King's attention and made him jump onto that, which is the AI boat. And it just is it's so brutal and frustrating, when I think about, like, that. For me, Xbox was like the console that got me, like, big into video games. I had a Sega Genesis as a kid. I had an N64. I had a couple of games on those I liked, but it wasn't until Xbox with the original Halo that was like the game that I was like, yeah, like, video games are kind of one of my like things. And I really love games. I think these things are so cool. There are a bunch of games on the original Xbox I just loved so much. The 360 came out. And that was a really formative thing for me in middle school and high school, was the Xbox 360 and playing Halo 3 and Gears of War and stuff like that with my friends, like, every night after school. And it just is so depressing to see this happen, that, like, it just is this thing that got jerked around, and these business plans and notions that just, I feel like anybody with a rational perspective could see that it just didn't make any sense. It was, they put all their, like, chickens in one basket, lit that basket on fire, or, like, I'm pretty sure at the end we'll get delicious fried chicken, and what at the end you got was a fucking mess of charred corpses. And it's like, and I could have told you that that's not how you make fried chicken, motherfuckers, but they did it anyways.
And it's a reminder that as much blame as Asha Sharma and Satya Nadella and everyone else correctly has for this, Phil Spencer should not be left out of these conversations.
Yeah.
He pieced out before he had to deal with the fallout of all of this, but this is on him too. He spent a decade setting this company up for failure, and it's here now, and we're living in the fallout of it.
Yeah, and then all these studios being let go that were part of this Game Pass promise, and for, they were able to put out 1 or 2 games under it, and now it's like, nope, sorry, you needed to sell, like, games that sold big bucks, and that's the thing you needed to make. I know that we told you that's what it was going to be, but unfortunately, we are going to have to make money, and we somehow committed ourselves to a strategy that didn't make money and couldn't make money. Weird, but we do need to make money though, so bye.
Yep. All right, that's it for the video game news. Let's do, this is also depressing in a certain way. Let's do some Doctor Who news, Sean, because following months of non-news and speculation, the BBC on June 10th, which was like hours after we last recorded, Purely Academic with news, announced that the previously announced Doctor Who Christmas special that was set to be written by Russell T Davies and produced by Bad Wolf had been cancelled, and the show was immediately being put out to competitive tender, which is meaning that it is being shopped to production partners. This is an increasingly common practice at the BBC now. It's required in part by law, and it often ends up with BBC Studios, which despite its name is actually a private entity outside of the government, ending up with the production rights, which most analysts seem to think is the most likely outcome here too. To be clear, this does not mean that BBC is selling or relinquishing the IP of Doctor Who, just the rights to produce the show in partnership with the BBC. They are basically opening bids for a production partner. RTD claimed in the announcement that no script was ever written for this special, but this is almost certainly a lie. Murray Gold, the composer, had said in interviews that he had read multiple drafts, and later news reports indicate that putting the show to tender was actually always the BBC's plan following the end of the Disney deal, but that they initially planned to do so in 2027 or 2028 after the special came out. And these reports indicate that the BBC ultimately decided it would be easier to get tender offers based on the status quo as of the most recent episode, rather than trying to sell the show based on what was planned for this Christmas special. And I think that indicates to me, reading the tea leaves, that something about RTD's plans for the special might have thrown a wrench in those works. The end result of this is that 2026 will be the first year since 2004 without any new Doctor Who on the air. There have been a couple years where we've only had one episode, like a Christmas or New Year special, but there's never been a year without it, and we probably will not see the show return, if it does, until 2028 or later. My thoughts, Sean, are I think overall this is probably the right call. I think... I don't know if I would really trust RTD to try to clean up the mess he made at the end in one single episode. My sincere, strong hope is that whoever gets the show reboots it the way RTD himself did in 2005. Just new Doctor. There's been an indeterminate amount of time since we last saw them, and we move on. We don't know which number Doctor this is because we don't have all that. We can fill in those details later if the show is popular, but I think we just need a hard reset, and I hope that's what this leads to, but we shall see.
Yeah, I generally feel the same way. Like in an ideal world, RTD would be able to make a Christmas special that wrapped everything up in a nice bow. But I'm kind of with you that that's an ideal world, and I don't think that RTD would have ended up doing it. Maybe he just needed to hire Stephen Moffat to write it for him, because Stephen Moffat was really good at wrapping things up in a bow for people to fuck up later. And yeah, it is very frustrating in some ways, just because it feels like it just feels like RTD's second tenure on the show had all this potential, and he squandered all of it, very quickly.
Yeah.
Early on, it just was very promising. And then it just very quickly fell into making just a bunch of moves that didn't make sense. I think particularly when I think back to the finale of his first season with Ncuti Gatwa, where they brought back Sutekh from Pyramid of Mars, feels like that was kind of the moment where it's like, oh, fuck. It's just like, even though that was broadly whatever as a story, it's like the decision of, we're not really committing to something bold and new for Doctor Who, which is what kind of the promise was. It ended up falling back into RTD just kind of redoing the stuff that he had done on the show previously, only maybe worse, partially because it just didn't fit the new production style and the look of the show and what the show had become in the intervening years. It just didn't work. I think the number one thing that whatever happens with the show, I believe that it will come back. I don't think there's any way that the BBC just lets it totally die completely. Who knows when it will come back, but please just ignore the fucking cliffhanger from the last episode. For the love of God, just don't touch it. As you say, just, treat it the way that we treat the Doctor Who TV movie. It's just like, I don't know, half the Doctor is half human, huh?
Yeah.
And just leave it there,
There's a lot I would like them to ignore. Ignore that, ignore The Timeless Child, ignore Flux,
yes.
Ignore just a lot of things, please, for the love of God. I mean, really, the thing is, the blueprint is right there in Rose, the first episode of RTD, where come in with a new companion, we meet the Doctor, it's all new. I think people forget, we did not officially know that Eccleston or Tennant were the 9th and 10th Doctors until one of the very last David Tennant episodes, where we first did the thing where they run through all the faces, and they canonized Paul McGann as the 8th Doctor. And they made it clear that Chris Eccleston was the next Doctor after that. Now, Stephen Moffat later retconned that, but in any case, like, they didn't think about that. We didn't start by trying to explain, how did we get from Paul McGann to Christopher Eccleston, blah, blah, blah. There was no attempt to do that, which I think was the right call. Just start fresh, and I think they're going to have to do that here. And whoever gets the show, I really hope they're looking for new people, for new blood, and I hope they're able to go back to basics. If the show is a smaller budget, frankly, good. Smaller budget, more episodes, cheaper sets, more shit in a rock quarry. Make real Doctor Who, please, for the love of God.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm with you that we need to find some people who are not part of like the fan community in the wilderness years, which is kind of what which is like the 90s period for people who don't know, when Doctor Who was off the air, pre it coming back in 2005. And so there was this like big, community of people writing books and stuff like that, and the comic books and all that. And so there's lots of Doctor Who media. It just wasn't, the new TV show stuff. And all of the big figures on new Doctor Who are people from that period of the show's history, like Stephen Moffat, like Russell T Davies. And it's like, let's get someone new, maybe, it could be someone who was a fan of like the new show in the 2000s, like, it doesn't have to be someone who's never seen Doctor Who ever. Although that could also be totally fine. But it just needs to be someone from a different generation than what we have had, because all of new Doctor Who has been from creators of Chibnall is the other one, that are from that period of the series in the franchise's history, and it's time to move on from there. It's been a long time. We need new blood, we need new ideas, and you're 100% right. We need like 12 episodes a season minimum, for the love of fucking God. Like, just this thing a lot of TV shows need to hear, but you're going sub 12 episodes and you're making a big mistake.
Like, however this shakes out, if you do not have a credible plan to be doing 12 episodes a year, and I mean a year, I mean annually, I mean every summer you have another batch, then don't make the show. I just don't think it's worth it. Like, honestly, if you somehow cannot figure out how to make TV the way TV was made for 70 fucking years, in the case of Doctor Who, kind of literally 60 some years, then just stop. Just don't do it. It's just not worth it, And we all know that you can, because something like The Pit exists now, and you can go like, but Doctor Who needs special effects. No, it actually doesn't. I actually know that Doctor Who does not need the most elaborate special effects in the world, because I've seen classic Who, and I know that the most beloved episode of modern Who is called Blink, and it's literally about looking at fucking statues for an hour because it was a low-budget episode of the show. We do not need to be doing Disney Plus style massive budgets. That's not the show this is. Just isn't.
If this is something I think about when I'm watching all my Ultraman stuff, and like, these motherfuckers were just making a new big rubber monster costume and a whole other cardboard city for people to blow up every week for a whole year, and then the fucking next year they did it again. That's not even, there's no break. They just kept going. Now, I don't need that for Doctor Who necessarily. That would be pretty sick. I don't need a 50 episode season. That would be insane. But it's just, but it's not impossible. I think people have somehow convinced themselves that it just can't be done, and that it's just demonstrably not true.
Yeah. I think that's the right place to leave it. We are at the end of the second era of Doctor Who, though, I think we can say. There's the classic era that is up through McCoy, and then Paul McGann kind of belongs to that, I think, to a certain extent. And then there is Eccleston through Shudigawa, and I think that is the second era, and we are now waiting for the dawn of whatever the third era will be. And I hope it is a distinct era.
Yes, very much so. Maybe they can freshen up the brand, call him Dr. Y, just bring some more mystery back to the brand. I don't know.
All right, Sean, let's get into the stuff. And you just mentioned Ultraman, and we just had a big, exciting Ultraman podcast last week. So why don't you fill us in on some of the other shows you've been watching? Because you've been dutifully, for close to a decade now, telling us about every Ultraman show. So I want to hear about where you are now.
Yes, so I've got two Ultraman shows to talk about, because one I had finished last time but didn't have enough time in the podcast to really get into, which is Ultraman Max, which we did watch 2 episodes of for Ultraman episode. But I have also finished the show after Ultraman Max, which is Ultraman Mebius. And it's actually kind of appropriate that we're talking about new Doctor Who in relation to these 2 shows, because they are more or less contemporaneous with new Doctor Who. Ultraman Max is 2004 to 2005. Mebius is 2006. And these shows are really fascinating. As someone who's been going through Ultraman, I talked about it with Max a little bit on our Ultraman podcast, but Ultraman Max is kind of crazy because it is really the first time in the history of the TV series of Ultraman. There's some like OVA, like direct to DVD stuff or like direct to video stuff they had done at this point. That is a little bit more navel gazing. This is that negative, but that looking back on the show's past. But Ultraman Max is the first full TV show that was like, hey, there is this big legacy of Ultraman material that exists in the history of the show. Let's use that and let's pull on that. And I do think it kind of indicates to me that there is something in the broader culture of the world around the mid 2000s that it feels like this was kind of the energy of like, let's start bringing back old properties and not just like do a new version of it. Let us like pull from the history of the show. Because previously the previous Ultraman show, Ultraman Nexus, was a like very hard stylistic break in narrative style break from what the show had been. And Ultraman Max is almost like attempting a course correction from that. So Ultraman Max is a very traditional style Ultraman show. Remember Nexus, the previous show had been a like very serialized drama where every episode led into the next one, and there's like a big overarching storyline and big character arcs, and structured more like a Lost or something like that. This has this ongoing mystery to it. Ultraman Max is every episode a fucking monster shows up, and Ultraman Max pops up and he fucking kills it. And there was something a little bit of adjustment with watching Ultraman Max, where the last more traditional Ultraman show was Cosmos, and Cosmos was all about we got to save the monsters and we're trying not to kill them. And then very quickly, Ultraman Max is not thinking about that. And he just shoots the monsters with a big laser beam and they blow up. I'm like, all right, okay, reset my expectations. Don't feel too bad about the monsters or you can't watch the show. But when you watch like 60 episodes of Ultraman Cosmos and the drama of that show is how do we try to stop the monsters without murdering them? Ultraman Max is like, I don't give a fuck. I'm killing this thing. It was a little bit of a readjustment. But it's a very fun show, if not a like stellar Ultraman show. It does have some interesting people involved. It was directed by Kaneko Shusuke, who you would know as he was the director of the 90s Gamera movies that we did a podcast on, director of the like live action Death Note movies, the director of the Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah Giant Monsters All Out Attack film. So very good director of giant monster stuff. And I would say like the monsters and the fights in Max are generally quite good. And I think some of that comes from his influence. And they brought back lots of people from the old show behind the camera. So we talked about on our Ultraman episode, Jisoji Akio did 2 episodes, but there were various other writers and directors from the old show involved in Ultraman Max. And then they also brought back a bunch of old actors from the show to play different characters on it. So like the big one being, they had Kurebe Susumu, who was the original Ultraman, or Hayata, the human form of Ultraman in the original show. He is in this show playing the kind of military leader of the overall group. And then they also had, I think her name is Sakurai Hiroko, she was Fujitine, the original love interest in the original Ultraman. That actress is back playing the kind of like lead of the science organization. She's like professor character. And then basically all of the lead actors for the old Ultraman and some even of the people from Ultra Q come back at least for cameos. The actor who plays Dan/Ultra 7 is in a couple of episodes. And so they're obviously not playing the same characters as from those shows. It's not set in the continuity of those shows, but it's kind of all those episodes are very clearly, they're shooting those actors with a level of reverence that very much tells you, even if I didn't recognize them immediately, I'm like, this is definitely someone who was an actor on the old show, and then look it up and be like, oh yeah, he was that guy from Ultra 7. And there's a lot of old people. And I think it says something about the life expectancy of people in Japan that all of these people are still alive. Like they were alive in Ultraman. Almost all of them are still alive today. Whereas with like Doctor Who, most 1, 2, and 3, those doctors are not with us anymore. A lot of the old companions have passed away. And in Japan, man, it's like all of these people are still alive, which is amazing. And it's been 20 years since Ultraman Max, and most of them are still with us too, which is crazy. Susumu Kotobe is 86 years old, still alive and kicking. And so that's one of the fun things about Ultraman Max is you get to see all these old actors come back. They're very fun. Some of them are still just great, and they give great performances. But I do think that does mean that I think kind of the central element of the show, which is the main character, Ultraman Max himself. Like, that stuff is fine, if not spectacular. One fun detail with this one is that this is the first Ultraman show that has a very notable voice for the Ultraman himself. Ultraman Cosmos talks a decent amount, but the voice is not as recognizable. The voice of Ultraman Max himself, when the Ultraman talks, is Kazuya Nakai, Ronoa Zolo from One Piece, amongst many others. This is a tradition that will continue on, I know. I know that the character Ultraman Zero is voiced by Miyano Mamoru. I know Nakamura Yuichi voices one of the Ultramans. I haven't gotten to those yet, but this becomes a bit of a tradition that very prominent voice actors voice the Ultramans themselves.
That's awesome. That actually sounds really fun.
Yeah. So it's a fun show, like nothing super flashy. It's also 39 episodes, so it's one of the shorter of the older Ultraman shows. And then that leads into the other show I watched, which is Ultraman Mebius, which also happens to be the last Ultraman show that was 50 episodes, 2006. They still fucking did it in 2006. Did 50 episodes of an Ultraman in 1 year, that's some fucking hustle, man. Like, they put that shit all out on the field. Ultraman Mebius is great. Like, this is a phenomenal show. I wouldn't put in my, like, top 3 Ultramans or something like that. It's not as good as, like, a Tiga. But Ultraman Mebius is very fun. And Mebius is really interesting because this is the one that is very like new Doctor Who Ultraman, because it does this thing where it tries to bring back the continuity of the classic Showa era Ultramans, everything from Ultraman through to Ultraman 80, and say that those shows, which sort of existed in a loose continuity. There were some crossovers of Ultramans between them. They never address why seemingly every year Japan has some new version of some sort of space task force that fights monsters. Like, what happened to the one that used to be really important and now there's a different one? They don't address any of that, in the narrative or anything. But they sort of say all that stuff happened. That was part of one grand community, like continuity, where Japan was just getting fucked over by monsters and aliens all the time for like 15 years. And then they stopped. And then Ultraman Mebius comes back to Earth because monsters and aliens are starting to invade Earth once again. And so you have this new Ultraman here kind of picking up the legacy of those old Ultramans. And it's a pretty interesting show because it does have that new Doctor Who feel of, it's like watching the school reunion episode of New Doctor Who where they bring back Sarah Jane and stuff like that, where they do have most of the old Ultramans come back and do cameos here and there as their characters this time, not just the same actor. It is the same actor. And they have like Ultraman, Ultra 7, Ultraman Ace, Return of Ultraman / Ultraman Jack, like all of those old ones come back. One of my favorite episodes is there's a whole Ultraman Leo episode. Ultraman Leo is the crazy, super violent one they did that was incredibly dark. And there's like a crazy Bruce Lee martial arts story. And they do a tribute episode to that where they do the structure from that show where Mebius fights a monster at the beginning, loses, and then Ultraman Leo shows up and the actor who plays him shows up and has to train him. And he has to learn a cool martial arts move to defeat the monster, which is the structure of Ultraman Leo episodes. And it's awesome. And they do a lot of stuff like that, where they're kind of paying homage to the history of the show and the kind of continuity of the show, but doing it in a way that I think is not just kind of cloying, which is a danger, but something that I think really makes it feel like this story is part of a grander narrative that was kind of on hold for a long time in the franchise that they brought back again and brought back some of the mythos of the old show. And they really just kind of balance it really well. And so it has just like a good sense of an overarching story, partially because of that, because you have like Mebius, the new Ultraman, who's kind of like a rookie trying to find his place amongst these like legendary Ultra brothers and these old Ultramans who, had protected the Earth, and they're trying to pass this mantle on to him. And he has to learn how to kind of stand on his own 2 feet. Just makes a really strong central narrative for the show. Ultraman Mebius also has a couple of movies, the big one being the Superior 8 Ultra Brothers, which is a very fun movie where they bring back not just the classic Ultramans, but they also have Ultraman Tiga, Ultraman Dyna, and Ultraman Gaia, who are the 90s era Ultramans, and all 3 of them are in it. They have to play a whole like sort of parallel universe thing to make the continuity of that make any kind of sense. But I find this era of Ultraman is very fascinating because it is this like huge shift where they had, through all of the 90s era shows in the early 2000s, moved to a mode that was like avoiding using classic monsters, avoiding using the classic characters or any of the classic mythos, coming up with different kinds of origins of where Ultraman comes from and stuff like that. And Mebius is trying to unify all of those. And from what I understand, this is true of where the series goes from this point. Like the next thing I'm watching, that I'm watching currently, which is called Ultraman Ultra Galaxy Mega Monster Battles. It's a very hard title to remember, which is sort of a spin-off, but it's connecting all these where, from what I understand, Ultraman, broadly speaking, takes place now in this longer ongoing continuity where new shows will continue to contribute to that. And Mebius is where this sort of happens in 2006. But for a very, very well done show, and bravo for these guys doing a whole 50 episode Ultraman series in 2006. Like that's some fucking cojones. Like that's some cool shit.
Absolutely. Those sound very fun.
Yes, and I'm very eager to get further into this new era of Ultraman. But I'm also now, the stuff I'm watching right now is where it starts to become a pain in the ass, where you have to do like a research paper to figure out what thing you need to watch next. Because now Ultraman's like a whole media property franchise of the 2000s, where it's like, oh, well, there was this one spinoff, and that spinoff had a TV special, and that TV special leads to this movie, and this movie is a prequel to this TV series. And it's like, you have to look at a fucking flow chart. I think I've got it figured out, but it just cracks me up. It's one of the fun things about watching a thing like this that takes place and happened over such a long period of TV history. So you got to see how the media changed. And it's just so stark when you're getting to the late 2000s that, and the internet becomes a thing, that it just gets really confusing. It just gets very complicated very fast. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't realize I'd have to look up a watch order list online for Ultraman to figure out what to happen next. Because it used to be, oh, I watched this show, and then I watched the show they made the next year. And you just kept going that way. It's no longer, nothing in life is that simple in the 21st century, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. All right. Well, you talked about watching some stuff, so I'll talk about watching and playing some stuff, because I did play, after our last podcast, Sean, the 007 First Light game from IO Interactive. It fucking rules. I agree with all the stuff you said on that episode. It's a very good interpretation of James Bond for the modern day. One thing that I was just like very happy with is that I was kind of worried that it would lean a lot on the Daniel Craig stuff, because not only is that the most recent Bond, but it's the last 20 years of Bond. I mean, Daniel Craig, his first movie is 2006. It was 20 years ago. The last time we got a casting announcement for a new James Bond was in 2005. It's been 21 years. It's nuts how long that's been. And I love certain of the Daniel Craig movies, and I like that era overall, but it also is missing a lot of what makes James Bond James Bond. Like, they never really do Q. They have Ben Whishaw playing a character named Q, but you never have James Bond go to the lab where he's working on crazy shit, and he's like, grow up, 007. You don't have anything like that. Those movies were, outside of the first movie, were pretty averse to having, like, sex scenes and anything with women, honestly. It's kind of weird. So there's just, like, stuff missing. And what I liked, one of the things I liked just as a 007 fan is I could constantly see where they were pulling stuff from in First Light, and there's a little bit of every era of Bond in this one, while being obviously a new interpretation for the 2020s with a younger Bond, with an origin story. Like the entire, sequence that is him doing training missions, that's in the same location that I believe the opening of the first Timothy Dalton movie is in, that also does a training mission. And you have, I think, a lot of, like, dialogue. Like, I think particularly how they write 007's puns is very Pierce Brosnan-esque. I think Q is very clearly, it's the Desmond Llewellyn Q done for a new era, who was the original, not just the original Q, but he was really the only Q. He's in all of the movies until the penultimate Pierce Brosnan, where he leaves because Llewellyn was old and sick. And then we got a new Q with Ben Whishaw in the modern movies, so they very much take from that. Obviously, the amount that gadgets play into the game is much more classic era James Bond. So like, there's just a lot of stuff they're pulling from, and I really enjoyed seeing all of that. And then on a gameplay level, it's, I really like the Hitman games from IO Interactive, and I respect them immensely. I think they are phenomenal games. I never personally got super duper into them. I would enjoy picking them up and playing with them, but like, my play style I'm kind of a chaos agent. You guys have all heard the stories of me playing Red Dead Redemption. My favorite thing to do in a Hitman game is go in and push against the grain and just fuck stuff up and do things in the most chaotic way possible. And one of the things I love about 007, and the other thing about, just to back up and say about Hitman is really a sandbox, right? It's what fun you make with it, right? It's, do you look up the challenges and follow this, and like how much fun can you have kind of self-directed with the little bits of hints those games give you. So I think taking a lot of those gameplay elements and putting them in a game that is more linear, more story-centric, that alone made me like more engaged in doing all of the challenges and stuff. But also, I think one of the smartest things 007 First Light does, and I think this should be like a standard for basically anything that does stealth from this point forward, is they just take your gun away. They just say, for large swaths of the game, not only is it like you will have bad consequences if you pull your gun out, you just can't. If you press the button for the gun, nothing will happen. Your license to kill is not activated. You have to engage with this either stealthily or through the melee system, which is a really good melee system. Like, it's not a full-on fighting game or brawler or anything, but it's much more fleshed out than a Hitman or even than like an Uncharted or something. And it's really fun because of that. And that means you just have to engage with it on the level of spycraft. You do not have the ripcord that every other stealth game has, which is, I'm just going to go in guns blazing and shoot everybody and maybe I'll eke something out, right? It just takes that option off the table, which also means that when it does allow you to do shooting, they're actual shooting encounters. Like, they get to build real third-person shooter like levels out of that can be really, really fun. And so I think on a gameplay level, I also love the amount of ways it thinks about how can we make 007 a video game. Because typically with any property, I wrote about this a little bit in my dissertation with like anime to video games. Typically with any property, you sort of look at the property and you say, what video game genre most matches this thing? And that's why every Dragon Ball game is some version of a fighting game. But that means also most Dragon Ball games don't really get to do the story or the humor of Dragon Ball that we all love and is central to its identity. And in past 007 games, the most famous 007 game is GoldenEye. And GoldenEye is a first-person shooter. And it's a very good first-person shooter for its time, and it has fun multiplayer and all of that stuff. But it's missing like a bunch of... You're not doing spy work, really, in GoldenEye. And you're not doing like going around and having conversations and all the other things that are part of James Bond. And one of my favorite things that I just really want to praise 007 First Light for is it takes this holistic approach where you are often doing a million different kinds of gameplay. You know, you would broadly say this is a third-person stealth game, but that only is the surface of how many things it's having you do and how many ways it's having you interact with dialogue and with following people and with being stealthy, but then also trying to solve puzzles, down to there's a fucking tie your bow tie minigame in the middle of this thing, just because like that alone is part of the James Bond experience. And I really appreciate how many ways into the material they find. I think that is kind of the secret sauce of how open IO was to saying, you know, we have done this thing really good with Hitman, and Hitman alone has a lot of parts to it. But we can tweak that, and we can add to it, and we can go in a bunch of different directions, and that's hard. That's not easy in video game development. So they deserve all the kudos in the world for that. And just as a fun game to play, it is the most fun. Yeah, I had so much fun getting through this. I did all the challenges in the tax sim that you could do until I ran out of, like, they haven't released any more, and then I kind of put the game away. I loved it so much.
I'm very happy you loved it. I thought you would. I mean, it is such a kind of beautiful way of expressing this property in video game form through interaction. And yeah, like I had like a dream the other day that I was playing that game again. Like there's like I think like there's something about the combat in that game, like as like in my subconscious of just like throwing people up against walls and punching them and throwing bottles everywhere and breaking shit. It's just like the reactivity of that world and the expressiveness of the gameplay is so potent and beautiful, you know, that it's not the most technical game in the world. You know, it's a little bit messy in some of those mechanics, but that messiness is so wonderful. And all the things that they let you do, is something I've just like continued to think about that game, particularly the gameplay, and how the kind of elegance of that design in its kind of messiness, since I finished it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, one of my favorite moments, this game was made by real ones, is there's a big chase where you're going like, I think it's when you rescue your mentor guy, and you're going down in that truck, down that giant, and you have to keep stopping and like firing at people from the like base of it, and it's scored to the theme from On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which has only ever been used in that Bond movie and one or two others, but it's like the best piece of Bond music. If you're in the know, you know, and they do the whole thing to that piece of music, and I'm like, yep, these guys fucking get it. They did their homework. This is the good shit.
Yeah. I can only hope that they, we get a 007 Second Light, Second Chances, whatever subtitle they go for, because it's so good.
If they do another one, they do need to get a better title. I hate to nitpick. First Light is not a James Bond title. That's Die Another Day is a James Bond title. Goldfinger, like that. First Light is not a James Bond title. Got to come up with something else and be more creative with that. Other than that, they nailed it.
They also need a hot coffee style sex minigame. Like you brought up the bow tie tying minigame, and it's the one thing they're missing out on. You don't have to make it visually explicit. You can have make it funny. But it's like there should be a fucking game. That's what I'm saying.
Do it like Austin Powers style with silhouettes and that'd be good.
There you go. Just get rhythm game. It's easy. It's like it fucking designs itself.
So since I played the game, though, I've also been on a 007 kick, and I have watched the first 11 movies of the series. I just watched Moonraker last night, which is the 11th, so I'm about halfway through the original run up through the end of Pierce Brosnan. And I started by I finally picked up, I'd been meaning to get this. Last year they did put out a 4K set of all the Sean Connery movies from the Eon series. Which is 6 of the first 7 movies, because Connery did the first 5, then he left and George Lazenby did On Her Majesty's Secret Service, then he came back and did Diamonds Are Forever. So it's all of the first 7 except On Her Majesty's Secret Service. That set, I have to recommend, it is one of the best 4K sets of classic movies I've seen. They did such an outstanding job, because the existing James Bond Blu-rays, they're fine. They're very much from a different era, though, where remasters did a lot of, excessive sharpening, and if you look at skin textures and stuff, it's very unnatural for how that is actually captured on film. And so in some ways the 4K restorations are a little softer in terms of the amount of apparent detail, but it's much truer to what actual film looks like and how that would have been captured. And combined with the Dolby Vision grades and everything, they are some of the best 4K restorations of, I would say 60s era movies that I have ever seen, and I was super, super impressed. So, and those movies are so gorgeous. They have such great production values. Even the ones that are less good, like the photography on location is so cool. So I was really happy. That's a 4K set everyone who's vaguely interested should get. It's very good. And then I've been watching on my old Blu-rays for everything else. And the 007 movies are really fun. And if, you've kind of got to be a certain kind of freak to want to watch all of them, because let me tell you, there are some fucking stinkers in there. The Man with the Golden Gun is a bad movie that has Christopher Lee as the villain, which makes it even sadder that it's a bad movie, because Christopher Lee should be the best Bond villain, and instead he's in this very shitty movie. Diamonds Are Forever, Sean Connery did not go out on a high. That's a very bad, boring. It's not really even bad, it's just boring as a Bond movie. But overall, I would say the first half of the series is pretty consistent. Sean Connery in particular, I would say he's 5 for 6 of those. Diamonds Are Forever is a dud. The other 5 are ranging from good to great. And so, if you're going to watch one Bond actor, you watch Connery. He has by far the most consistent run. But I've just been going through them, and I've been enjoying it. It's fun. It's been surprisingly easy to just get through each of these. They're an absolute blast. And I've been keeping a set of rankings as I go. I started in the first movie as Dr. No, and I wrote down Dr. No, and then I watched From Russia with Love, and I went, does that go above and below this? And I've just been ranking them ever since. And so hopefully when I'm done with this whole project, I can share that in written form or podcast form. I will tell you this was kind of my conclusion going in, but it was restated when I watched it. Of the original, pre-Daniel Craig movies, the best Bond movie is On Her Majesty's Secret Service. That is the weird one, because it's the only one with George Lazenby as Bond. And it's weird for other reasons too. But that is such a great movie. It is it's the most faithful Ian Fleming adaptation they ever did, and I think that's part of why it is so good. Is it's very rich and novelistic. But you also have Diana Rigg as Tracy, who becomes Tracy Bond. It is such a good story. Blofeld is the villain in that one, and it's the best version of Blofeld. That movie just kicks unholy amounts of ass. It's got the best John Barry score, because he's working with the original 007 theme, the On Her Majesty's Secret Service theme, and the Louis Armstrong song, We Have All the Time in the World. And so it's such a rich musical tapestry. It's the one that introduces ski action to the series, which is my favorite version of James Bond action, because it's the only series that consistently does ski chases. And they're so cool, because they would just get like Olympic skiers to do crazy shit on camera. That's the thing about Bond movies that's so good, is they had such high production values, and they never skimped on anything. Like, if you were going to do something cool, they just did it. Like, even the relatively lower budget ones, like Live and Let Die, has the scene where Roger Moore's stunt double literally runs across a bunch of alligators to get from one side of a lake to another, and it's this amazing stunt. And so you just get moments like that, and it's part of what's so fun about these movies. So I recommend that one. And then the other one that's the best is From Russia with Love. Every time I go back to that movie, that's like honestly up there, I think. If you're thinking of like great movie sequels, From Russia with Love has to be up there, because it's the second Bond, and the amount that movie locks in and just nails everything it's doing. And you've got Robert Shaw as the villain in that one, who is another assassin trailing Bond, and he is one of the best performances in the whole series. I love that movie. And then my third favorite is The Spy Who Loved Me, which is the best Roger Moore movie, that is the movie that I think is actually the one that is as good as Goldfinger's reputation is, where I think Goldfinger to me is good, but is not my favorite Bond movie. The Spy Who Loved Me is like, if you're talking about formulaic, like this is like James Bond 101, The Spy Who Loved Me is actually the best version of that, not Goldfinger, and not enough people talk about that. So if you want some recommendations, those are three you should go start with, and they're three different Bonds, and everyone should watch them because they're good.
Yeah, I have been procrastinating on getting and watching these movies. I've been thinking about it constantly since 007 First Light, but I've been doing some other stuff. But I still do plan to get to doing some more 007 at some point. But you know that inevitably I'm just going to watch them in order. It's like, it's good you're giving recommendations for people who don't have the same sickness we both have. But I'm obviously, when I decide to watch them, I'm just going to watch them in order because I'm a bad person.
Also remember that James Bond is sometimes a bad person, and so, sometimes he will just grab a woman and kiss her without her consent, and you have to remember this is the time period being depicted in the TV show Mad Men, but it does not have the ironic distance of Mad Men, and sometimes it's not okay, sometimes it's funny for the time, sometimes it's really cringe, it gets better once you get out of the 60s, I'll say that.
Yeah, but and then sometimes you have characters named like Pussy Galore, and they're just like, I don't know how they got away with that shit.
Sean, the one I watched last night, Moonraker, the woman in that one is Dr. Holly Goodhead, and the thing is, I think everyone makes the jokes about like Austin Powers, because Austin Powers has like a lot of vagina and stuff like that. None of the Austin Powers names are actually as silly as the silliest James Bond names.
Yeah, like they have to make the puns worse in Austin Powers to make it obvious that they're making a James Bond reference, because if they did one that's at the level of stupid pun that the James Bond ones are, you wouldn't even realize that that's what it's parodiizing.
You got Pussy Galore, you got Holly Goodhead, you've got Plenty O'Toole in Diamonds Are Forever. Oh, it's great. Well, let's bring back the stupid... That's another thing. A 007 First Light needed more vagina pun names. Let's just be honest. It's part of the heritage of the series.
It's definitely where the Daniel Craig movies went wrong, is that they didn't come up with a new vagina pun for every Bond heroine.
The closest they came was in Quantum of Solace. The woman in that one, or one of the women he sleeps with, is Strawberry Fields, which is a pretty good modern... It's not a vagina pun. It's not a sex pun, but it's kind of funny,
I mean, it's just funny to imagine someone naming their daughter like Strawberry.
Yes.
With the Fields family.
Oh, indeed. All right, let's talk about some video games, Sean. I'm going to talk about a game, but you have a whole list of things to talk about with Super Robot Wars Y. Is this also just going to be your game of the year 2026 also, I guess?
I don't know. It'll be I did a lot of homework to play the game. It's a whole thing. Do you want me to talk about that now, or do you want to talk about Street Fighter?
Go ahead.
All right.
No, you go.
So Super Robot Wars Y, obviously, was my game of the year last year. It was the first Super Robot Wars game I played. I've played Super Robot Wars Alpha, which I played through slowly over a long period of time. That was the PS1 one that I played on my jailbroken PlayStation Vita, which I recommend people do. It's a great way to play games. And I am also currently playing through Super Robot Wars V, which is the first PS4/PS Vita one. I ultimately went with playing the PS4 one. It's only available on those platforms in Japanese. You can play it on PC with an English translation, but that one's fun. I'm only like 10 missions into it. But I also have played the the new DLC for Super Robot Wars Y. So if you remember, when I originally talked about Super Robot Wars Y, or one of the several times I originally talked about it, I included the first pack of DLC for Super Robot Wars Y because it took me so long to play through that game that the first pack of DLC came out while I was just playing through the base game, and that was the DLC that had like the Big O in it, which is one of the reasons I bought it, is because I like the Big O. They then had a second pack that was part of the same kind of season pass as that first pack of DLC, and I had not played that originally. But then they did a third pack that's kind of was a surprise one that we didn't know that they were going to do. That was a much bigger one. And so I have since gone through and I've done both of those sets of DLC. But I also watched a shit ton of animes. I started doing this in I think late April, where I started picking through a bunch of the anime that were in these DLC packs. So, but although I only really watched the stuff from the third DLC. So first to talk about the second DLC pack, that featured 3 series that are all Super Robot stuff. It has the Brave Fighter of Legend Dagarn. It has Steel Jeeg, and it has a version of Getter Robo, of like the original Getter Robo with Ryoma, who's the protagonist from the original series. So that is kind of pulling from Getter Robo Armageddon, which is a series I'm currently watching through. Those are pretty fun. I have not watched those shows because they're very long. Dagarn is a early 90s Super Robot show from the kind of Brave series that are these kind of disconnected series of Super Robot shows they did in the early 90s. That one is fun because you have Matsumoto Rika, who's a voice actress people would maybe know as the voice of Ash/Satoshi in Japanese Pokemon. She voices the main character, who's this young boy, and when she shouts out Dagarn, which is in basically all of the combat dialogue, the way that she does it makes it sound like she's saying doggone. She's like, Dagarn! So it makes it sound like she's saying, it doggone robot! And I'm like, is this a Japanese boy who's 12 years old, or is it like someone on a ranch in Oklahoma talking about doggone robots? And that's also fun because Dagarn, the robot, with a very funny name, is voiced by Jaime Sho because he's like a transformer. It's not a robot, it's like a living creature that happens to be in a robotic form. And so that was fun. Then Steel Jeeg. I'm a big fan of Steel Jeeg. I kind of want to watch that show. It's from the 70s. It is a Go Nagai kind of co-production. The mangaka who obviously of Mazinger Z and Getter Robo fame. Steel Jeeg is crazy because the backstory for that character is he is a teenager voiced by Torufuria Amuro. This from 1975, so it's pre-Amuro. So it's that kind of more like Neketsu, like hot-blooded hero kind of character. Apparently, the main character in Steel Jeeg, basically dies in a motorcycle accident, and then his father, without his consent, turns him into a cyborg. And then as a cyborg, he fights evil enemies that are trying to take over the world, as things are always trying to take over the world. And the best part about Steel Jeeg, this is my favorite thing about Super Robot Wars, is when you encounter a series you know nothing about, and then they just tell you offhandedly the most insane shit about it, which is that the main character in Steel Jeeg, who got turned into a cyborg, he physically transforms into the head of Steel Jeeg and then combines with 2 other robots to make the giant robot. So it's not like he doesn't become big. He doesn't pilot a big robot. He just turns into the head of the robot and then sticks that on 2 other things and then fights evil enemies. And that is the goofiest fucking thing. To be clear, it is not like the head doesn't look like it's a thing that someone transformed into. It just looks like any other kind of 1970s era super robot. But that is apparently the backstory of Steel Jeeg. And I do just want to, it's a 10 out of 10 name. Steel Jeeg, such a good name for a robot. And then the Getter Robo stuff is not pulled from the narrative of Getter Robo. It's just using some of those characters with an original backstory. But that DLC is a fun time. It was fun to kind of get exposed to these 2 different weird super robot things. And I do, at some point, I gotta watch some Steel Jeeg because it just seems fucking bonkers. The big DLC.
It's just such a genius idea we've seen a lot of mech shows, Sean. That is, it's hard to present an idea that you and I haven't seen before. That's an idea I haven't seen before.
Yeah,
it it's one of those that the robot.
It shocks you that it would happen in the early years of the super robot genre. That feels like a thing that would have happened in a Studio Trigger show in the 2000s, not something in 1975 where Torufuria turns into a robot head and sticks it on a big robot. But the big DLC, the one that I was very excited to play, is the third DLC pack, which that has a bunch of series. It has Space Runaway Ideon, which I believe is the first time that's been in a new Super Robot game for a very long time. It has Cross Anja, which was like a 2015-ish anime series. Star Driver, which is a thing I had never heard about before, but I'll talk about it in a second. It's fucking awesome. The only one of these that I did not watch is Idol Master Xenoglossia, because it has terrible reviews, but I kind of need to watch it now because I'll talk about what that is. And then Eureka 7, but specifically it is from the most recent movie High Evolution 3, which is complicated. I'll mention what that is. But those are the main series. And then they also have the High New Gundam and the Nightingale from the Beltorchica's Children version of Char's Counterattack, which are the two different versions of Amuro and Char's mobile suits, which feels like it's mostly there for Char because the Sazabi in the base game was good, but the new Gundam was like way more powerful than the Sazabi. And then the Nightingale is just fucked up. Like it is such a powerful mobile suit or a unit in the game now. That it feels like they gave Char a really dramatic upgrade with those. But there's not a lot of narrative content from that. It's just they give those two characters that were already in the game two new mobile suits that they can use. So Pack 3 is really fun because it is mostly drawing, again, other than Beltorchica's Children, from these different series that all kind of touch on big kind of like universe changing powers or stuff that is kind of like going between alternate dimensions. And Space Runaway Ideon becomes part of the linchpin of the story, where it's all about these members from each of these different universes kind of finding their ways into the setting of Super Robot Wars Y, which is different because in Super Robot Wars Y, all of the characters are all part of a continuous like crazy history that they made where all the different shows in the base game all somehow basically happen in the same continuity. The only things that they bring characters from outside of that universe in the game is Ore Battler Dunbine, where people come in from Bisonwell, which that makes sense from that setting. And then they do the same thing with the people of Pentagona World for Heavy Metal Elgine. But other than that, all the Gundam stuff and all of the like Code Geass and all of those happen in that same continuity. It's not like different parallel universes. For Pack 3, all of the characters from these different universes come together, find themselves in the world of Super Robot Wars Y, end up getting picked up by the main group of the A Advent, which is your ship, and become part of your crew. And then it's about sort of solving how and why have these people all been kind of summoned in this place. And specifically the Ideon stuff narratively, I think, is incredibly well handled. They write the characters so well, where it feels like it's basically they're pulling from near the end of Ideon. It is just Cosmo, Kasha, and Deck, the little kid who has the little squirrel. It's just those three. It's not the solo ship. So they, in the Ideon, get pulled into this other universe, and they assume that it is the work of the Ide itself, and you find out in the story it kind of is, that the Ide has pulled them into this different kind of dimension for its own strange purposes. And it's the way in which Cosmo is just not taking any bullshit, and he is not being friendly. Like, because the whole thing with the story Super Robot Wars Y is it's very sort of saccharine most of the time. It's a lot of like, we're all working together and we're all buddies and people get along very easily in the story, which makes sense because it just kind of helps the story move along. But for this DLC, it's a lot more about how these people are not really willing to work with each other. And for Cosmos, because he's like, I can't trust any of these people. It is from the period of the show where like they have been to Earth and Earth rejected them. And it's like the solo ship is its own island community in the universe that can't trust anybody. And if they reach out to anybody, they get destroyed by the Ide. And I think the way that they write those characters in that situation is really well done. And it's a fun contrast with the other characters from the game previously, because of that sense of how difficult it is to cooperate with Cosmo, and he does not want to work with people. He's very reluctant to become part of the overall ship, and it takes a long time for him to slowly start opening up, and same thing for Kasha. Deck is a little bit nicer. I will say one thing that is very funny, so they do have all the voice actors return basically, with the exception of the actress who played Kasha, who has since passed away. And they use voice recordings from one of the older Super Robot Wars games. I think it's one of the mobile phone ones. And so those are just old ones. But they do have the voice actor for Cosmo and the voice actor for Deck record new lines, which the guy who plays Deck is an old man now, and he was a literal child in the original show. And you hear his voice start breaking, like the over the course of the show, he hits puberty, his voice starts breaking, and it is admirable that he is trying his best to still voice this like 10-year-old kid, and he's like a 60, 70-year-old man, and it's just very, it's you know, it is what it is. It's not like there's not a lot of lines of dialogue, and it's, you know, it probably in a more, from a more rational perspective, you'd probably say you should recast it. But the nature of this is that you want to have the fun of having these characters and pay homage to it, and rather than doing a new Super Space Runway Edeon story. But you got to give these people credit that they're still coming back and recording new lines of dialogue for Space Runway Edeon, 46 years on from the release of that show.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's and then the other thing with the Edeon is, from a gameplay perspective, it's awesome because it's so powerful. It is so ridiculously powerful, and they basically came up with a new mechanic for it, for the Edeon gauge, where as things happen, like the Edeon takes damage or you defeat enemies, the Edeon gauge gets higher and it hits different thresholds where you then unlock different moves. So like early on at the beginning of a mission, it can only basically punch. And then eventually you get like the Edeon sword, which just fucking kills anything basically in one hit. You then eventually get the Edeon gun, which is the crazy like big Turk hurricane gun in the show. And that is just does insane amounts of damage. But in some specific story context, they push the Edeon gauge to the highest level. You can't normally get it there. It's only in specific missions. And when the Edeon gauge gets to the highest level, it's amazing because the energy for the unit, that normally your actions all take amounts of energy, just becomes the infinity symbol. All of your attacks basically do 9,999 damage. And you have attacks in Space Super Robot Wars called map attacks, which are attacks that don't just go against a specific unit, but they do area of effect damage on tiles around the map. And for that, you've got the Edeon Sword has a version of the attack that just does map damage, where basically two parallel lines extend from either tile on either side of the Edeon. And normally they go out to about like 10 tiles. When the Edeon gauge is at max, it goes out to an infinite number of spaces. So it says range, and it's just an infinity sign. And so you could be on one side of the battlefield, use that, and any unit for the entire length of the whole map that's on either side of the Edeon basically just gets destroyed by the Edeon Sword, and it's fucking crazy. Again, it is so good.
If you use it too much, does it kill everyone on the field and like delete your save file? Because I think that's what it should do. If like you overuse the Edeon, it like deletes everything.
No, unfortunately it doesn't do that. But my understanding is I think it's Super Robot Wars F. I think one of the old Super Robot Wars games on like the Super Famicom had a thing kind of like that, where if the Edeon got to that, I think it was the Edeon didn't die. It's that like if its health got to a certain point, it is basically, and then the Ide activated, and then and then fucking you basically get a game over. Again, I'm just repeating what I read online. I haven't played that one, but I think it's something like that. They didn't do that here. I mean, the notion of the Edeon taking enough damage to get destroyed is basically impossible in Super Robot Wars. I think it's so powerful. It's fucking ridiculous. I put the difficulty on the highest level difficulty because you're also playing with my in-game save file where all my units are at level 99. They also like upped the level cap and added new ways to upgrade things, so like your guys just get more and more powerful. But the Edeon is just crazy and it's so fun. The other series, so Cross Anja, this is one where I watched the show. It's like a 26 episode show, and it's better than I thought it would be. Like it's a show that has some issues, and it's got a very kind of mixed reputation, which meant I kind of went in it with a little bit of low expectations. But if you get past some of the more unpleasant stuff in the first two episodes, where there's like a scene of sexual assault, and there's some stuff like that early on, where the show kind of sets itself up as being something that's trying to be very edgy. But when you get past that, it kind of leaves that behind and it kind of goes into a more normal mode. And once it gets there, it's a pretty decent kind of more modern, you get 2015 era mecha show where it is about a princess, Anja or Angelis, who lives in a world that everyone can normally use magic. She is born as what they call a Norma, which is someone who can't use magic, but that is hid from the world because she's a princess. She thinks she will be able to use magic, but she doesn't ever have to do it because her maids and stuff do it for her. And then basically on the coming of age ceremony, it's revealed that, oh, she actually can't. She is one of these quote unquote Norma. and you kind of learn that people in this world who can't use magic are discriminated against. They're like thrown into basically like gulag camps, and specifically they are used to pilot mechs to fight these dragons that appear mysteriously around the world that threaten human civilization. It's got like, in terms of tone, it's maybe adjacent to something like an Attack on Titan. It's got a little bit of that kind of vibe, but with also like a kind of sexual quality to it as well, that I think early on is a little bit more iffy, but it becomes, I think, a better part of the show. Like, it's a show that like has a big sex scene near the end of it, which is a real rarity in TV anime. And so I think it is dealing with some interesting themes. It doesn't land all of them, but it's a fun time. It's a show that I did quite enjoy. And the main thing is I do really love the main character, Anja, who's voiced by Mizuki Nana, all-time great voice actress. She also does most of the main themes, sings them. She's an amazing singer. And Anja, her whole characterization is she used to be a princess, and then she just went through the worst shit imaginable, and now is just this complete like badass who takes no bullshit from anyone. And so kind of like Cosmo and Space Runaway Ideon, she just is not putting up with anybody's bullshit. She's very much like off on her own mission, trying to do her own thing. And for Cross Anja specifically, it's particularly fun because that show has amazing music. And as with all Super Robot Wars stuff, you can just get MP3s in the game and load your own MP3s. And so I just downloaded the soundtrack for Cross Anja and pulled a bunch of music for her different moves, because they give her like 12 different moves. She's been in a bunch of Super Robot Wars games, so I'm assuming they're kind of borrowing that, and that's why she has like 5 more attacks than any other character in the game has. But it makes her a fun inclusion. The show that was a big surprise to me, because I had not heard of it, but I think it is a phenomenal show, is the show Star Driver. Its full title is Star Driver Kageyaki no Takuto, or Takuto of like Brilliant Takuto, or something like that. That's how you translate that. This is a Studio Bones original anime from 2010 that is written by Inokito Yoji, who is the writer for a bunch of great series. Most notably for this, he's the original writer for Revolutionary Girl Utena, because Star Driver is basically like, it's not as good as Utena, but the pitch is it's basically an anime mecha version of, or just a mecha version of Utena. That it has the like structure of that show. It is about this boy who like ends up on this island, who is Takuto, the main character, and he is what they call a star driver, which are people who can pilot these mechs. And the whole world has this like very like bizarre lore where it's set basically in contemporary Japan, but there's this secret organization that uses these mechs for like mysterious, nefarious schemes. That ultimately ties into like them trying to take over the world. But everything they do involving the mechs takes place in this thing, I think they call it zero time. Basically, time stops. Only people who are star drivers can move within this kind of dimension. And so that's where you have to fight. And they're basically trying to make it so that they destroy zero time so that they can just command these mechs outside of this kind of specialized dimension. But none of that is really important. Like the lore in the setting is intentionally very complicated and convoluted in the way that Utena's is, but it's all about trying to deliver this kind of coming of age story, a story about adolescence of the 3 main characters, 2 boys and 1 girl that are in this kind of love triangle, and the kind of complicated relationships of how do we navigate our feelings for each other, how do we try to kind of pursue our ambitions for our lives and stuff like that. There's this notion that all of the mechs, what they call cybodies, are powered by people's libido, and they mean that not just as your like sexual desire, but it's your kind of like ambition, it's your desires more broadly speaking. It's more like literal definition of the word libido. But all of the story is like, it's got all this kind of Freudian notions to it, and it is a very good show. It doesn't come together as well as Utena. Utena is like, in my opinion, one of the best anime series ever. Like, it's ridiculously good. Star Driver never quite gets to that level, but it is a beautifully animated show. Like, Studio Bones just does a phenomenal job. The main character, Takuto, is voiced by Miyano Mamoru, and he gives an incredible performance. The music is phenomenal. One of my favorite things about the show, and this is a very Utena thing, is in the lead up to the fight at the end of each episode. It's a very episodic show that every episode's about a specific fight, in the build up to that fight at the end. When the fight starts happening and like kind of like people start getting their mechs and stuff, you have a character starts singing an a cappella song that then becomes this big orchestral piece. And it's this almost kind of ritualistic element for each episode. When the song starts, you know the battle's going to begin and the themes of the episode are all going to kind of click into focus. It's a very, very good show. I highly recommend it. It's on Crunchyroll. It is actually like it's a very early Crunchyroll streaming show in that like they streamed it in 2010. Which is like one of the first times they did that. So it is you are still watching one of the oldest streaming anime around. If you go watch Star Driver, it's fantastic. It's not like super prominently featured really in the DLC here. And it's a shame. I feel like Star Driver should just be one of the main series of the next Super Robot Wars game, and maybe they will do that because it's got a lot more potential than just having the one character with the one mech in it. But it is a really cool show. I highly recommend people check it out.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah. And then the last ones, I'll get through these a little quick. Idolmaster Xenoglossia. I did not watch this show because that got bad reviews, but it seems fucking crazy now that I played the game. It is like, so one, it's Idolmaster. This is apparently the first TV anime version of an Idolmaster thing, because Idolmaster comes from like a mobile game where you are raising idols, like pop idols, and it's like a management sim. Xenoglossia is a mecha show where the main character, I think her name is Haruka, I think she would like, again, I haven't watched the show, I've only played the game, so this is what they kind of tell you in the game. She wanted to become a pop idol, but ends up accidentally auditioning or going to a thing for quote-unquote idol masters. And idol in that context refers to, it's some acronym that is what the mechas are. And so she ends up accidentally as a mecha pilot when she wanted to be a pop singer, which seems like a big mistake. I'm sure there's more context to it if you actually watch the show.
That sounds like the title of a good isekai show of like, I wanted to be an idol, but I wanted to be a pop star, but I became a mech pilot.
Yes. It very much, it does sound like a light novel title. And she ends up as the pilot of this mecha that from what I understand, you learn over the course of the show is like sentient, like has a sentient AI, and she ends up falling in love with the robot, and she refers to the robot as her boyfriend. She like kisses the robot, like it's a giant robot, but she comes up and like kisses it on the monitor on front of it. They do a specific image of that in the story where they show you that. And apparently there's like, they like specialize in destroying meteors, because part of the whole story of the DLC is like in Ideon, these mysterious meteors are appearing in space that are bombarding the Earth. And in Idolmaster Xenoglossia, from what I understand, the robots are there to help destroy meteors in a similar context in that show's fiction. But it just seems wild and very weird. Like I just couldn't quite make heads or tails of it, but it seemed very bizarre, and I kind of want to watch the show, even though it got bad reviews. The premise seems so insane, and I had assumed when I saw that this was part of the DLC that it was some weird thing that like was a relatively recent Idolmaster spin-off where they had done everything they could do with the franchise, so they're like, why not do a mecha thing? And I didn't realize it predates the Idolmaster TV anime that is the thing that I think of as being Idolmaster, the animated version. And this was the first time they did it, and it seems fucking crazy.
This is old enough that it has a DVD release.
There you go.
From 2012 that was in multiple volumes, because that's how anime used to be released.
Because it's a 2-core show. Very, very peculiar. The last one for the DLC is Eureka 7, and this is one where I went on a whole journey. I rewatched the TV show, because I hadn't seen the TV show since like 2013 or something. Eureka 7, great TV anime, also Studio Bones, 2005, 2006 era. It kind of drops off in the last core, but the first 3/3 of the show are phenomenal. It will probably come up someday on Japanimation Station, because it is very Gundam adjacent and does very interesting Gundam things. But that's not the version that's in the game. The version in the game is from the High Evolution movie trilogy, which I just got to explain a little bit what these movies are, because I had gone out of my way kind of to not watch them because I liked the TV show, and these movies are just panned. People hate them. And Eureka 7 seems like a kind of cursed brand, because there's also a TV anime sequel called Eureka 7 AO, which I have never watched because also people fucking despise it. There's an older movie that also people don't like that I also didn't watch. But the High Evolution trilogy are from like the late 2010s. I think the most recent one was in 2022 or 23. And It's really peculiar. The first one is like 30 minutes of original animation at the beginning that is like a prequel to the TV show, but depicts events that don't line up with the continuity of the TV show, thus implying it's kind of in its own version, like its own universe. And that becomes more clear in the later movies that, yes, this is all set in a like parallel universe version. But it's a little bit disorienting at first because you think they're just depicting a thing called the Summer of Love, which is an important event that happens in the history of the TV show, but is never directly shown. And so I thought like, oh, the movie's going to show what the Summer of Love was and kind of dramatize the events of that, which is also where the main character, Renton's father, passes away or dies. He basically gives his life to end this big disaster is what that event was. But then when you start watching the sequence, you're like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, this does not line up with what happened to the TV show at all. And then the other 45 minutes of the movie is a compilation movie of events from the original TV show. But it's not like what you think of as a compilation movie, which would be we're trying to tell a story by like trying to tell a coherent story by taking sections of the TV show that all link together and sort of like, here, we're going to tell you the story of like the first 10 episodes of Eureka 7 after this new prequel stuff. They go to the middle of the TV show to what is like the most fan favorite arc, but it's an arc that's in the right directed smack dab in the middle of the TV show. Has no connection to any of the stuff that they did that was the original prequel material. It's about as far away from that material narratively as you could get in the show. Almost any other part of the show you adapted would have a closer connection to the prequel stuff they added. But it seems like they just edited like 3 episodes of the middle of the show together because it was a popular section of episodes in a popular storyline and just give it to you that way. But because it doesn't connect in any way that really makes sense, there's just a bunch of narration over the top of it. It's gotta be the weirdest compilation movie thing I've ever seen. Like, I can't quite fathom about who it's for, why you'd make it, because obviously this is not in an era where the classic compilation movie of, well, you can't easily access this stuff, so if you're going to see it, this is one way you could see it, go to the movie theater, watch the compilation movie. Anyone that wants to watch Eureka 7 could just watch it. So I don't know why you just do like a clip show version of random episodes from the middle of the show. It's very, very weird. Then you get the second movie in the trilogy, which is all set in like contemporary Japan. To be clear, Eureka 7 is like in the far-flung future, set on a different world where humanity what you think is a different world, it's a bit of a Planet of the Apes kind of scenario where it's in the far-flung future. You find out it's Earth. Sorry, spoilers for Eureka 7, but whatever. Old show. But anyways, it's as far away from contemporary Earth setting as you can get. So instead, it's contemporary Earth. You have a character, Anemone, who is a character in the TV show, is kind of like a pseudo anti-hero character, but there's like a version of her that's in contemporary Earth. And then you have these monsters showing up that they call Eurekas. Eureka is the name of the main character of the show, basically, or the love interest of the main character. And then it's almost like a Neon Genesis Evangelion kind of thing of where Anemone needs to get into this thing to fight these monsters called Eurekas. But instead of fighting them directly, she goes into the minds of the monsters. And when she does that, all of a sudden she's in footage from the original TV show in like 4x3 and everything of different sections where that character appeared in the TV show. And they just reuse that footage. It's really weird. And it tells this kind of strange story that, as far as I can tell, is like it's a parallel universe where the main character of the TV show, Renton, dies. Eureka, the other main character, blames herself because the whole story is a love story between these two characters. And so in this continuity, Renton dies, Eureka blames herself. She has special powers. Those special powers create parallel universes, and one of those parallel universes is the real world, or the real world exists in the thing that we think of as Eureka 7 as a parallel world. It's very confusing. It doesn't make sense. It's very bizarre. And then you get the third movie, which is set in the future of that continuity, and it's like The Last of Us or Logan, or like The Road, where it's an older version of Eureka who's given up on the world because Renton's dead, and she's in this like different universe she's never been a part of before, and she's this like kind of old, washed out drunk, basically, who then there's this young kid who has the same powers she used to have, and she has to protect them from like people trying to get her, and it's like a road trip movie of the old drunk, washed up hero trying to save the promising new young heroine. And it was like 2022, and so it was already kind of like washed out story by that point that had been done a bunch of times. And the third movie, like that one is kind of acceptable because it's at least like an original story that's not leaning on large quantities of old footage. They're sort of editing oddly from the old TV show. But it's very weird. Like, it is a thing where if you've watched the TV show, I kind of think it's worth watching the movies because they are so bizarre. I just can't fathom why they would have made these movies this way, because I have heard people pitch them as being like, it's like a bad version of the rebuild of Evangelion movies. But that's not what it is, because it's not like they did an earnest version of trying to retell sections of Eureka 7 and then split it off. It's like they made an incomprehensible compilation movie and then did... It's like... It would be like if you did Rebuild of Evangelion, but you started with the third film after they did something that has no connection to it. And you're like, what the fuck is happening? It makes no sense. It's very weird. But the one thing I will say for it is that the washed up, drunk, old version of Eureka fucking rules. She's super cool, and I kind of love it, because she's like a 16-year-old girl in the TV show that's very kind of like sweet and kind of like docile, or, you know, she's not a very aggressive character. She doesn't speak out what she feels. And so watching her be a badass secret agent who goes home after, you know, completing her crazy secret agent missions and just gets drunk on random booze and falls asleep on the couch, I'm kind of into it. It's kind of sick. And so the fact that they use her, that's the version of the character in the DLC that you get to use, I kind of love. It's fucking like, it's such a weird, like, I like to imagine if you're someone who didn't realize that these movies existed, but you're a big fan of the TV show, which was very popular, you're like, oh, Eureka 7's in the new Super Robot Wars thing. That's awesome. Because from what I understand from looking it up, this series has not been in many of these games. And you just jump into this one, you're like, what is happening? Who is this character? What is the story? Why is she drunk all the time? It is really, really bizarre, but I kind of loved going on the journey of figuring out what the fuck these just truly strange movies are.
That's awesome. That's so weird.
Yes. So Eureka 7, hopefully one day they could, if they want to do more with this franchise, hopefully they could do something sane with it. I don't know why they made one great TV show and then seemingly can't do anything good with it since then. But it is what it is. And Super Robot Wars Y is super fun. All these characters are super fun to use. The story is a good time. Again, most of the story stuff is what I was talking about with Ideon. That kind of like extends across how they handle the other characters. But if you played Super Robot Wars Y and you have not picked up the DLC and you like that game, I would strongly recommend it. Like, it is really good. All these new units are super fun. And you get to spend like an hour going through the soundtracks for all these TV shows and picking out MP3s important to the game, which is the other best part of Super Robot Wars.
That's awesome. Well, is it okay if I shift over to talking about Street Fighter?
Yes. What's going on with Street Fighter, Jonathan?
Well, I've been wanting to get back into Street Fighter 6 for a while because, just to recap, you and I were both fucking gaga for that game when it launched in 2023. And, you know, for me, it was really new because I was never someone into fighting games as a kid or even like a young adult. It had just never been a genre that like I had done much with. I didn't know how to play like classic 6-button controls. I didn't know any of that stuff. Now, Street Fighter 6 is like the most newbie-friendly fighting game of all time, partially because it has a really good modern control option if that's how you play, and it has the World Tour mode, which is just one of the most delightful things any game has had this decade. You know, it's so good. And so I really loved it. You really loved it. We played it then. I kind of fell off before the DLC started coming out, and in the years since, they've had this, you know, steady stream of DLC. We're going into year 4, but every year they've had 4 new fighters, so we've had 12 so far, and then the new season is starting with Yasmin in August. And so I'd always kind of wanted to catch up on all of that, and I had picked up on a sale Street Fighter 6 on Switch 2. That was a launch game for Switch 2, and I thought it would be fun to have on the Nintendo Switch, and I kind of started playing around with it, and I started getting really into it, and I finally kind of just took the plunge a couple weeks ago where I got the DLC. I was able to get the year 1 and 2 stuff on sale because it's just part of the bundle with Street Fighter 6 on Switch 2. And I started diving back into it, and I got super sucked into the rabbit hole again, and what changed this time is like I started out playing modern controls, which is what I had played on the original PS5 release. And for those who don't remember or don't know, modern controls basically takes the 6-button control scheme where you've obviously got your 6-button, light, medium, heavy punch, light, medium, heavy kick, and then you've got, your D-pad where you are doing, or, stick or whatever, where you're doing quarter circles, half circles, all of that stuff to input commands. And on modern, they simplify all of that, and they give you 3 attack buttons, just a light, medium, heavy, where they basically cut the moves in half and give you those. Then there is a dedicated special attack button, and there is also a button you can hold down for automatic combos. And it's a really good method. And, one thing I will say is, since I've gone down the Street Fighter rabbit hole again, I've been watching a lot of fighting game related videos on YouTube. I've been seeing a lot of stuff online. It's a very nice community. It's actually a very welcoming community. You would think with something that can be as fucking intense as fighting games, there would be like a lot of gatekeeping or something. I've actually seen like none of that. I looked up a lot of stuff about control schemes, and basically every single person to a person was just like, use whichever one you have more fun with. It's all good. Just have fun. I'm like, that's very healthy. That's actually a very nice way to do that. But I've always wanted, just for like my own edification, just so I could also like go back and play older games better, I've always wanted to like figure out 6-button controls and get good at that. And part of my barrier is it's never really made sense to me on a standard gamepad, which is fair because it wasn't developed for a standard gamepad. Right. It's always had to be adjusted for that. And so I was getting really into Street Fighter, and then I found on sale on, this was on Woot, which is like a offshoot of Amazon that does like warehouse sales. They had something I'd been eyeing, which was 8BitDo made a leverless controller, I think last year, which is a version of a fighting stick that doesn't have the stick and instead has buttons. So I have it here. This is the 8BitDo all button controller. So you've got 4 buttons for the various directions, and then you've got 8 buttons, your 6 for attacks, and then 2 more for other stuff. And I had read a lot about different fighting sticks, and the leverless thing actually made a lot of sense to me because it's become really popular in fighting game communities lately because you can do combos and move motions and a lot of stuff more reliably and more quickly than when you are using like a physical stick or something. And it's also a little more adaptable to different situations. This is normally a $90 controller, and I will say it's absolutely worth that price. It's a phenomenal piece of kit, and I love it. But I got it on a sale on Woot, brand new for $40. And I was like, that seems like, I don't know what the hell happened that they were selling it for that much. It was around Prime Day, but it was actually better than the actual Prime Day sale that this controller had on Amazon. So it's like, that's a price where like it's worth the risk if I don't like it. It does have a little bit of a learning curve. The way a leverless controller works, most of these, and this was developed originally by a company called Hitbox, but your 3 fingers go on basically left, down, and right, and then up, jump is put at the bottom where your thumb will go. And that is obviously different than if you're playing on a gamepad or something, because up is now below all of those. But if you think about it almost like a keyboard, it's where your thumb would go on spacebar. So if you're used to playing with anything with a keyboard where spacebar is always jump, it'll make sense there. It did take me a little bit of getting used to that, but I got through it. I got over the hump pretty quickly, and this is where I like forced myself. I turned on classic controls, I did the tutorials, and I'm like, make myself learn this just for fun. And it opened up the game to me in a whole new way. One, having like this controller made it so much easier to like understand intuitively what all of those things are for. I also found I've very reliably been able to do all of the quarter circle, back circle motions. The one that I could never get before on a controller is the dragon punch move, which is forward, down, forward again. That one I've become very good at doing, and that's good. And then having the light, medium, heavy punch, light, medium, heavy kick, and everything that opens up. I've just had such a blast going through and learning how to play the game that way, because I would never put down anyone using the modern controls. I think the modern controls are really good. There are competitive players who use the modern controls, so don't take this as a like one is better than the other. But I've just found for me, I just wanted to like get to know the game better, and having that level of control where you have the entire control suite open to you, because in modern controls, some of it is blocked off, and being able to know like, okay, this character has these 6 basic moves that then change when you are, crouching or pressing back or whatever. Then in addition to the specials, all of that was really cool to learn and to have fun with. And then also, I think it like helped fix a lot of like bad habits I had as a player, where like a lot of new fighting game players, I just jumped a lot. You shouldn't jump too much in Street Fighter. No. There are certain like anime fighters where you want to jump a lot, but you want to be more precise about your jumping. Using a leverless like is actually really good for that, because your thumb is down there and it's a dedicated button, and it's not just something you can kind of like casually flick up and jump, and you're also not going to do it by accident, has helped fix that. And then also I think modern controls, for me at least, probably because they made it easier, made me overuse special special moves, when obviously a lot of fundamentals is just, can you get through a fight mainly relying on the 6 buttons? That's good. Like, that's being able to do that is, like, really important. And so all of that has been really fun. And I do just, again, have to, if someone is looking for a controller like this is affordable. It's under $100. They make this is a version that is for Switch and Windows. And it even has a little knob that goes, one is for Switch, one is for Windows. This is the coolest thing on it, is if you're on the Switch version, it puts A and B in the correct places. But if you go over to Windows, it flips them around, because that's how Windows and Xbox do it. And that's really nice to have. There is also a version of this made specifically for Xbox that I believe also works on Windows. So it's a very useful piece of kit. The buttons, it's all done like a mechanical keyboard, so you can pull the keycaps off and put other switches in there if you want, although I really love the switches they have in here. The sounds they make, the clickiness, it's like just fun to click and clack on. So all of that's been great, and because it's nice and thin and it doesn't have like a stick on it, it's really easy to just have on the couch and use in your lap. I have like the same way I would use a laptop or something, so it's very versatile in that way, and it's allowed me to play a lot of the game. And basically I've played through World Tour again to completion, and now I'm doing a lot of the extra stuff there. World Tour, they've also added in every single DLC fighter is in there. Some are built into the main sort of run of the story. Some are in extra events they call One Fateful Day, where you go back to your base where you switch from day to night, and it basically loads you into a different version of the world that has some different circumstances, and that's where you go like meet that fighter and do their missions and all of that stuff. And I also learned, you can tell Street Fighter 6 was made by the biggest fighting game freaks on the planet, because they made the whole thing in World Tour doable on an arcade stick, which I think is hilarious when you think of how many things on there are really for a controller in like moving around, because it's like a Yakuza open world kind of thing. But I've mostly just been using this, and it works fine. It's very good. Anyway, so I've had fun with that, and I went through all of World Tour, but I focused on the DLC characters. And then I've been doing a lot of stuff in, training mode, arcade mode, just one-on-one outside of that with all of these characters too, and I've gotten to know a lot of them. And it's outstanding. The DLC characters for Street Fighter 6, they've done 4 a year, and you can tell that they've had more time with all of them. So, like, it's like if you do the arcade run of, like, Mai from Fatal Fury or Sagat from the old Street Fighter games, they just have like more drawings and voice acting in their story mode than most of the base game players had in their arcade mode, because they've just had time to really do stuff with them. And I've loved basically every one of the DLC fighters. The ones I've really gone deep with are Aki, who is a new character based on Fang. I think Fang is supposed to be who's from the old games is like her master, but she's like a poison user and very technical. You have to do a lot of weird stuff, like you send out a poison bubble and you poison your opponent, then you can send out this like whip thing and like activate the poison and it does all this damage. She's a really fun character. She's the first character I got really kind of obsessed with in this. I also played as Ed a lot. Ed is the leader of Neo Shadaloo. He was one of the like kids kidnapped by Bison and turned into this like evil power user, but now he's kind of broken free and he leads this like gang of young kids, and he's really cool, and I loved playing as him because he's got all these interesting like distance moves, but then he can also pull you in or come close and do all these up close like punches and stuff, and he's really cool. I did the entire story stuff in both the story mode, the World Tour, and in arcade with Terry and Mai, who are the 2 big guest characters so far. They're from the Fatal Fury series of, that's right, King of Fury.
Yeah. The King of Fighters.
The SNK.
Yeah, because Fatal Fury, which is part of the King of Fighters franchise.
Yes. SNK has a lot of franchises.
Yes,
I've learned. They really rolled out the red carpet for Terry and Mai, I've got to say. Not only are they really fun to play with, Mai in particular, but like they have by far the most kind of in-depth integration into World Tour with their own mode that has just a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, they bring their own stage with them, and then their arcade mode for Mai in particular has just, you can tell everyone at Capcom wanted to draw Mai Shiranui because there are a million pieces of art for Mai in her arcade mode, and it's really funny. But she's awesome, and I like mained Mai for like a week or 2 there just because I really loved playing as her. And she like really, something unlocked with me playing Mai where I was getting a lot of mechanics of this game. She's just really cool. And then in this last week, I got the Year 3 pass, and I've been playing a lot of Sagat, who is one of the oldest Street Fighter characters. I think he's in original Street Fighter 1 as one of the enemies.
Yes, he's one of the bosses of original Street Fighter 1, and then is in one of the bosses of 2.
Yeah.
So far, and then so forth, yeah.
Yeah, so he's been in Street Fighter forever, and he's the guy who uses Muay Thai, Thai martial arts, and the way they've done him in Street Fighter 6 is awesome. For one, he's like twice as tall as anyone else in the game. Even if you're going up against like Akuma, he's just towers over him, and like his like low punch will come in and hit someone in their head. It's great. I love that whole side of him. But overall, like he's a pretty easy character to use because he's such a like big, heavy brawler, but he's also got some of those distance attacks. He's got his own version of like a Hadouken style thing and that sort of stuff, and he's been really, really fun. But I've at least touched on all of the various characters in here. You've got Elena, who was one of the new characters in Street Fighter 3, and she's really cool. Akuma is back in there. M. Bison is back in there. I haven't done the M. Bison stuff yet because I'm waiting to get to him in the World Tour and see some of that stuff with how they've brought him back, because his whole thing is now he's in one of M. Bison's clone bodies and all of that crazy shit because M. Bison has died a billion times, yes. I think. But anyway, you've got all of that. So just like the DLC they've integrated, they've done such a phenomenal job with. I really love these characters. They're like the ones I haven't done a ton with yet are Sea Viper and Alex. I did play with Ingrid last night. I did a couple rounds. Not like, I didn't like go in and like do like the character guide. I just like dropped in and I'm like, what are her attacks like? And she's out of a completely different world. I've learned a little bit. She's not like a Street Fighter character originally, I don't think. But she came into the franchise in such a weird way. She's basically a magician. Her moveset is absolutely fucking insane, and I love it. It's great. But this whole game, man, Street Fighter 6 might be the most like full-featured package of a game I've seen since Halo 3 in terms of like just how much it has in it, that it scratches every itch you could possibly want. I also got to praise the Switch 2 version. I think it is overall the best conversion of a console AAA game to the Nintendo Switch that I've seen so far on either Switch or Switch 2. Because for the main like fighting modes, arcade mode, one-on-one, online, any of that stuff, it's perfect. It's on point, it's 60 FPS, but it runs in a 120 FPS container, so you get all of that like extra, movement, kind of perfection and all of that stuff, and it just looks really good. There's some visual cutbacks, but they're pretty minor. It's using DLSS, so while it is based on, I think, the PS4 version of the game, it's probably got higher image quality than that, or the Series S version. So it looks really good. World Tour has some cutbacks. It's the same as PS4, where the open world runs in an unlocked frame rate, and then in battles it does have to cut down to 30, because in World Tour you can have like 8 people on screen at once or something crazy. But again, it's still all running in that 120 FPS container. But overall, it feels very uncompromised as a port, and I really like having it on Switch because, again, like sometimes with the arcade controller, it's fun to just put this down on a table, and then I don't have to connect the Switch to anything. I just put the Switch right next to the controller in front of it and play, and I've got a dedicated screen for it right there as a little arcade experience. So it's a really good game to have on Switch too, and it's such a good conversion. And I'm excited to keep playing with it, just keep having fun. I've already put in about another 60 hours on top of what I did on PS5 back in the day. It's like I've had like other games come out that I've bought and tried to play, and then I wind up getting sucked back into Street Fighter. I am so into this bullshit. I've been going back into the Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection and trying to see if I can play any of those games. They're much harder, but, I'm trying. But they're again, I just love going back and just, like, seeing the sprite work on, like, Street Fighter 3, which is just the most fucking gorgeous game, or stuff like that, or Alpha, which has the anime art style, which is really cool. I've been going in and watching like Street Fighter lore videos on YouTube and learning about the history of the series, because there's just so much cool depth. And then also I'm really excited because now that I feel like I have a good handle on classic controls, I'm not going to say I'm great. I'm not going to go into a tournament or anything, but I can play it and I know what I'm doing, basically. I can reliably do all of the special moves and stuff like that, whatever that baseline is. Now I've got like a lot of other fighting games I've like collected over the years and maybe not played super deep, or played but just kind of casually enjoyed, like a Dragon Ball FighterZ, where I'm like, I can go in and I could actually like maybe actually like play this game. I'm really excited now for Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls, and being able to, if I get that on Windows, I could use this controller with it because that is also coming to Windows. And I'm just like, I don't know, I'm jazzed because like I've always loved fighting games from afar because I've enjoyed the characters and the art and the music and all of that stuff. But now I'm in a position where I feel like I understand the genre better, and I've gotten to that point where it's just fun to try things out. It's fun even when you're losing. To just see what you can do, and I'm really enjoying it, and it's awesome. And Street Fighter 6 is it's like a game of the decade contender. It's so good. It's such a huge comeback for that series. The amount of content in it is so fun. I thought when I started playing World Tour again that I wasn't going to do the whole thing again. I did. It's the most deliriously fun campaign mode anything like this has ever had. Oh man, I love this game so much, Sean.
Yeah, listening to talk makes me really want to get back into it because yeah, I mean we talked about I think on the last episode how cool because they announced the Tifa was going to be part of the new DLC pack along with the 3 other new characters. And yeah, they've just been sort of steadily adding more characters to the game that all seem very cool. I want to play as Terry Bogard. He's got a cool jacket. He's got a cool hat. Yeah, so maybe finally I'll once I'm the cure a little bit of my Super Robot Wars madness I've fallen back into. Maybe I'll reignite the Street Fighter madness because that game is a hell of a game.
And what's cool is, with each of these years of content they've done, they've had basically a mix of, like, new characters, returning favorites, sometimes guest characters with Mai and Terry. This last year was, like, Sagat is one of the oldest Street Fighter characters. Alex was a Street Fighter 3 newcomer, etc., etc. The Year 4 pass is all newcomers. It's all, like, brand new Street Fighter characters. Bosch was in the World Tour mode, but not playable, but he's a character you knew. And then, obviously, Tifa is a guest character who's never been in Street Fighter. So, like, that's just really exciting. Because I think, Street Fighter at this point could so easily rest on its laurels. There's dozens of characters they could bring back who've been in other Street Fighter games. And I love that they're still committed to, like, coming up with brand new characters. Like Yasmin, who's the first one, looks really cool. I think she's supposed to be from the Philippines, and she uses knives. And, I don't know, she just looks awesome, and I'm excited to see what she's all about. So, this game rocks.
Yeah, and if when Tifa comes out and you get like way into that, then you can play the other big fighting game Tifa's been in, which is Air Guy's God Bless the Ring on the original PlayStation.
Who is Air Guy's one that I should try to I don't know if that's on the PlayStation Store for PS3. If it is, I need to pick that up.
I have no idea. I don't know if that game's supposed to actually be good or not. I've always remembered the name of it as Air Guy's God Bless the Ring because it's the best subtitle any game has ever had is God Bless the Ring. That should be every fucking fighting game should have that as the subtitle. Street Fighter 6, God Bless the Ring.
Yes. Okay, it was on the Japanese PlayStation Network store. I need to make a Japanese account and download some of those, maybe. But yeah, anyway, I love Street Fighter. I'm loving my fucking giant arcade controller. I'm playing 6-butt. I'm doing it. It's great. Now I'm wanting to go to an arcade and try shit out. There's one near us. I kind of want to go see what they've got. It's awesome.
Yeah, I'm very excited for the next Purely Academic when you be like, yeah, and I bought a Marvel vs. Capcom 2 cabinet. It's and it's great. I'm eyeing the X-Men one. I think I can get a good price on that too.
I will say my wish list on Switch right now is just full of various fighting game re-releases and collections that have come out that I'm just kind of waiting to go on sale. Because we're actually in kind of a golden era of good re-releases of these. Particularly Capcom has done a good job of getting, because, I mean, they're best known for Street Fighter, but they have a million of these, particularly from the 90s, and that's cool. I will say, Sean, one other thing I did is I fished out my old cartridge of the first Nintendo 3DS game I ever bought. You might remember the 3DS had a very lackluster launch. The game I bought with my 3DS back in 2011 was Super Street Fighter 4 3D. And I pulled that out again. I'm like, now I know how to play Street Fighter. How does this play on the 3DS? The answer is awkwardly. Because you're like, wait, does this 3DS have 6 buttons? Yes, it does, but you have to go A, B, X, Y, and then L and R, which is just, and holding it is awkward. I will say the circle pad works decently, because it's like range of motion is so limited that I found this on the Joy-Con too, that it's better than a standard joystick if you're trying to do fighting inputs, and probably better than like your average D-pad, but it is still hard. I will say though, the 3D in that game looks really good. Street Fighter 4 is such a good looking game, because it was like done in this like cel-shaded style, and it actually converted to that console pretty well, but it is an awkward experience trying to use all 6 buttons.
Yeah, I'm just very excited for you becoming like a total fighting game freak, and I just can't wait for you to be like, I just signed a petition for them to make a new Darkstalkers. I don't know, what are they doing? God damn.
Maybe you'll see me at the next Evo getting my ass kicked or something. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you're trying to replicate the classic Evo moment with the parrying Chun-Li's kicks from Street Fighter 3. It's like you just spent like an hour trying to do it.
Yeah, Evo moment, what was it, moment 37 or something like that?
Yeah, I don't remember what it's called. It's
Yeah.
Like, I think it's in Japanese, I think they just called the, what is like, let's go Justin, because some guy shouts it out, but Justin's the guy who loses that fight. It's a whole thing.
It was Evo Moment 37. It has its own Wikipedia page. It's called the Daigo Parry. It was part of a Street Fighter 3 Third Strike semifinal match in 2004. This is a long Wikipedia article.
Oh, it's
Jesus.
like the most famous moment in the history of fighting games, without a doubt.
Yeah, I know. All right. Anyway, Sean, do you want to finish up today's episode with the Monthly 10?
Oh, yes. I'm very excited to give you some Monthly 10. So the task you laid out for me, Jonathan, in honor of the Odyssey movie adaptation from Christopher Nolan coming out in a week or two here, is you wanted me to come up with 10 other pre-modern works of literature for adaptation. You said, like, try to come up with, like, a director and a cast for them. And I have done so. I have some of these are movies. Some of these are like streaming shows, because I realized that like some of them didn't quite make sense as a movie. And I only have one thing in here that is technically not a pre-modern work of literature. It technically is an early modern work of literature from the 17th century. I hope people will forgive me for stretching it a little bit, but I felt like it's also my number one, and it's the one I felt very passionate about. I was like, I got to include this in my list, even if technically it is early modern and not pre-modern. I hope. I
issued the challenge, and I say it's okay. So okay. I think I'm the arbiter on this. So I'm fine with it.
All right. So basically what I did with my list is I tried to initially just come up with a list of 10 totally cursed projects, but then I inevitably came up with a couple that, like, I was like, oh, this actually would be amazing. Instead of trying to, like, fuck them up, I just left them. So how I've kind of listed this is the bottom of the list are the ones that probably would actually be cool. And then as you go up the list, it becomes more and more cursed as you go until you reach number one, which is a movie that if they made it and you tried to make me watch it, I would, jump off a cliff or something before I saw it. So that's how I've kind of gone across about this. Now, most of these, or almost all of these, are what you would call like canonical pieces of like quote unquote Western literature. But I realized I need to include at least one piece of world literature. Although I think if you did this movie, probably you would like change the setting, because I didn't keep the cast in the nation of where it comes from. But my number 10 is a piece of world literature, The Tale of Genji, one of the, progenitors of what we would consider to be a novel, of course, one of the classic pieces of Japanese literature. For people who don't know anything about The Tale of Genji, I have not personally read it, but what I know of it is that it is basically, in a nutshell, Genji is an absolute fuckboy, and he sleeps with like every woman he runs into, and it fucks everything up. I don't know if that's an accurate assessment, that every time I've seen or heard things about it, it seems like that's basically the story set in like 12th century Japan, I believe, in like in like the imperial court. And for this, I thought, well, the book was written by Murasaki Shikibu, who was a woman, so I figured we should have a female director. So for the director for this, I want Greta Gerwig. And so this was where I was like, oh, this is actually going to be a really good movie. For Genji the fuckboy, again, I think you'd probably change the setting to be maybe like, British court or something like that. Maybe you change the character names. I'm just going to leave what they were in the book. But for our fuckboy Genji, it's Timothée Chalamet. Who else could it be? He's just too, smoldering and too sexy, and he keeps fucking ladies, and it just ruins everything.
I thought you were going to say Jacob Elordi, but Chalamet is funnier for this, definitely.
Then I've got Lady Fujitsubo, who is Genji's sort of adoptive mother, but also lover, because again, he fucks everybody, including the woman who takes him in. And this is Natalie Portman. This was when I came up with this casting, like, this is going to be a fucking great movie. I just think I want to see the like weird Freudian romance between Timothée Chalamet and Natalie Portman.
Had you just watched May December when you put this together? Because she basically did this.
Yeah. And then for Lady Aoi, who is the woman who is Genji's first wife, who also starts as like a child in the story, I believe. I think if you need to make some adjustments to the sexual politics of the story, I imagine, for it to be palatable to a modern audience. And I just sort of gave him, it's Zendaya, because it's like, Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, they're in Dune, why not? And so you have your love triangle between those three. Again, I haven't read the actual story, so I don't know enough to give you like a breakdown of how this movie would work. But I was like, but if they made this movie, it probably would like win a bunch of awards. So that's my number 10.
As Greta Gerwig, so it would be good.
Yeah.
And you cast Zendaya, so it would piss off all the racists who are you can't have black people in stories earlier than 1999 or whatever their fucking position is. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. My number 9, this is also something that I realized very quickly, like, oh, this would actually be like an incredibly popular TV show, is an adaptation of the Decameron. Of course, the classic Boccaccio story that is about 10 Italian kind of noble people, 7 women and 3 men, who sit around and tell, so it's 10 speakers, each speaker tells 10 stories for 100 stories, hence the Decameron. And so it's an anthology kind of thing, very similar to the Canterbury Tales, which maybe will come up later. And for this one, the Decameron, which I haven't read all of, but I read a good chunk of it in college, it's mostly very comic stories. So this would be sort of a comedy with a little bit of a dark edge. And so I figured for showrunner Phoebe Waller-Bridge, I feel like that's kind of like the right tonal space. Again, I think this would actually end up being a good TV show. And then for the cast, my idea was you have the 10 speakers, 7 women, 3 men, and I think you would have them all double up roles. So you would have both the meta narrative, but then within the stories they tell, the same actors would also play different characters within the story. And I think you
let's do it like Drunk History style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you just cast popular UK comedians. Like, I think that's most of who the cast is. So you get like a Greg Davies, David Mitchell, Ashlyn B, Diane Morgan. Basically, like, watch a bunch of episodes of Taskmaster and just cast people from those. And I think you just end up with a fucking award-winning TV show that, like, a bunch of nerds will watch and really like.
And it'll be 100 episodes, but made, in 3-episode seasons every 3 years. And it'll be finished when we're all dead.
Exactly. And it would be great. Number 8 is an adaptation of the Odyssey. This is so basically, before I get to tell you what the story is, my pitch for this is that it is a legacy sequel to the 2004 movie Troy, which is, of course, a light adaptation of the Iliad. And that they make this legacy sequel because of all the money that the Odyssey is going to make. And they're like, well, but we can't make our own Odyssey with the cast of Troy because they just made the Odyssey. So let's do the Odyssey, which is the story of Orestes, the son of Agamemnon. This story is very important to the Odyssey, where Agamemnon, broadly speaking, the leader of the Greek army in the Trojan War, returns home thinking he's going to have like a great reception, and instead he's fucking killed by his wife and the man that his wife's been sleeping with while he was gone, and then his son Orestes has to avenge his death. Now, because it's been like 20 plus years since Troy came out, I've updated the age for all the characters to be older relative than they should be, because you have to keep Brian Cox as Agamemnon, because it's like one of the best pieces of casting of that movie, which is a very well cast movie. And Brian Cox as Agamemnon, like, Troy has some problems as a movie. Brian Cox is not one of them. He's so fucking good at that as Agamemnon. So you bring him back. Of course, obviously he's like the only person from that movie that can come back, because all the other characters wouldn't be in the story, but he's here. For Clytemnestra, again, I have to like age up all the characters. Dame Judi Dench, come on. There you go. And her lover, and this was the piece of casting, like, now this is going to end up as like, at least for the actors, amazing. I guess who is Clytemnestra's lover? Stellan Skarsgård. Like, I want
that's pretty good.
The love triangle between Brian Cox, Judi Dench, and Stellan Skarsgård, with Skarsgård plotting Brian Cox's murder. Now that's some fucking good shit. Now for Orestes, I was having a really hard time coming up with anyone. This is Agamemnon's son, and then I realized they did that fucking TV show Succession, where they had like 5 of kids that are Brian Cox's kids in that story, and so I just picked one of them from random. I haven't seen that TV show, and so I picked Kieran Culkin. I'm like, yeah, I looked at a picture.
Oh, that's the best one you could pick.
I looked at a picture of him, and like, that guy looks like he would be a good Orestes. Like, I haven't seen this TV show. I maybe seen him stuff. I don't know. And I'm like, there you go.
In the context of Succession, he would be probably the funniest character you could pick to avenge his father's death, because he would be the most ineffectual. But yeah, great. Yeah, I desperately want to see this movie. Who's directing it?
Now, this is the big roadblock. Because Wolfgang Petersen, who directed Troy, passed away. This is why this is an 8 and not like a 9 on this list. Is that then I saw a thing if I knew this, I had forgotten it, that David Benioff wrote the script for Troy. And he's since directed stuff on Game of Thrones and things like that. So I think the studios would just be like, just fucking give it to him. And that's the big tragedy of this movie, is that fucking David Benioff is the director.
I thought you were going to say give it to Roland Emmerich, because I feel like him and Wolfgang Petersen did a lot of the same kinds of movies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So give it to him.
Sure. Well, I'm fine with that change. Benioff will, of course, he ends up having to do the script. I mean, this is not an ideal world I'm imagining here. But sure, I'll give it to Roland Emmerich. But I had a very fun time with coming with that cast, and Brian Cox should play Agamemnon in something again.
I was planning to watch Troy again this week before the Chris Nolan Odyssey, just because it's been on my mind, because that movie, it has problems. It also has a lot of good stuff in it.
Yes.
Like, the casting is so good. It's got some great action. The director's cut is actually pretty good. Yeah.
The fight between Achilles and Hector is great. It's like a great movie fight for sure. But that's my number 8. Now we're going up. We're getting into some slightly more cursed territory here. 7. This one's just cursed from like the idea of it, but I think the people I had on here is okay. Is Plato's The Republic. This would be an Apple TV Plus series. Now, for people who don't know, Plato's Republic is a work that is about like him imagining what a utopian society would be, but it is constructed through a dialogue of Socrates with other philosophers and them like questioning this and him coming up with what it is. But what the TV show is that they would find some way to turn it into some crazy fantasy action movie, like series, and they have to like, there's something's wrong with the Republic and people have to fight to fix it or whatever, because this is also where like Atlantis comes from, the Republic and stuff like that. For this, I've got Socrates, who is just a narrator, and it's Anthony Hopkins. So Anthony Hopkins narrates as Socrates. And then there's no characters in the Republic, so they have to make them up. So I didn't come up with a name for him, but the protagonist is going to be Channing Tatum, and he's going to become our action hero. He's the guy who realizes there's a rot at the center of the Republic and has to save it. And the showrunner is Damon Lindelof. And he's bringing his sort of mysterious, experience from things like Leftovers or the Watchmen show, and he's trying to express that like critique of society with an ill-fated project that's exclusive to Apple TV Plus.
Apple TV Plus has by far the best shows, though, of any of the streamers. Like, they have the best batting average by like 1,000,000%. And here's the thing. Apple TV has basically done this with Foundation.
Yes, that is my inspiration for this is Foundation, 100%.
Which I keep hearing is actually very good. I have not watched it. I probably should, because I enjoy most of Apple TV's other stuff. And so I actually think this is plausible. But here's the difference, Sean. I like the Lindelof connection. I like Anthony Hopkins. I'm going to say, not Channing Tatum, I think it should be Jason Momoa, because Jason Momoa has starred in 2 different Apple TV shows. One was that show C, where everyone is blind, and then there was one, I think, called, it's not God of War, I think it's Lord of War, or something like that. And he keeps doing these kind of like short-run Apple TV shows, and I think he's a better actor than Channing Tatum. So I like that idea, because Jason Momoa in The Republic is just a funny sentence.
I'm fine with that. I had a hard time with this one. It was more the premise and less the casting, because again, there are no characters to cast. They have to make them up. So if you wanted to have Jason Momoa, it could be both of them. Maybe you think the protagonist is going to be Channing Tatum, but he dies at the end of the first episode, and actually it's Jason Momoa who is the one who takes up the mantle and must solve the rot at the heart of the Republic.
That sounds great.
All right. Moving up, number 6. This is maybe the most goofy of all my ones. And it's goofy because it's for a movie, or it's a story that has been adapted a lot, but never really done all that well. And that's Beowulf. We've had a lot of weird Beowulf things that are either directing the story directly or adapting the story directly, or like a version of the story. And here I was thinking, you know what? The Mission Impossible movies seem to basically be done. So what can Tom Cruise and Christopher McQuarrie do? Well, they can try their hand at a brand new genre of epic fantasy action. And so I want Christopher McHugh as the director and Tom Cruise to play our Beowulf. It's a kind of role he's never really tackled, but he needs to be our Beowulf. And then to keep the Mission Impossible thing going, I also want for Hrothgar, who is the Danish lord that Beowulf arrives at his land and helps out by killing Grendel. Hrothgar is, of course, Ving Rhames. Because
you've got me, Sean.
Yeah.
This is my number 1 in terms of what I want. Because here's the thing. It would be good. Christopher McQuarrie is kind of a genius. Tom Cruise does not frequently miss. It would sound ridiculous, and then it would come out and it would be pretty good.
Yes. And then for the other characters, I just thought, well, I need a bunch of British people to play the bad guys. I don't know why. It's got to be British. And so Grendel is going to be Tom Hiddleston. I don't know if I think that maybe
pretty good.
There's like he has a bit of a human form and maybe transforms or something. Gunn's mother, Cate Blanchett. I think that was an easy one for me.
Well, wait. Where's Rebecca Ferguson? Because this is the Tom Cruise thing.
I guess it could be Rebecca Ferguson. Or there's got to be maybe we have a different female, because there's not a lot of female characters. Maybe we could create another female character in the story, for her to be like a Beowulf has an ally on his ship or someone he meets that helps.
So she is British, and she's got, and she and Tom Cruise have great chemistry. So
yeah, which is why I don't know if Grendel's mom is quite the role for Rebecca Ferguson. And then most importantly, at the end, I think we go all the way to old King Beowulf. And the dragon at the end of the story. And for the dragon, I want to bring back Benedict Cumberbatch from his, award-winning performance of Smaug in the Hobbit movies. So he can, do that. We can recreate the famous meme clip online of him doing the motion capture, and just bring him back again to play another dragon.
I think it's the most fun he's ever had as an actor.
Yes.
I think he would like this.
Yeah. So I'm very excited for that one, number 6. Now, once we're at 5 and up, these are the ones that I think would be very cursed movies that I would definitely not want to watch. Number 5 is an adaptation of the oldest epic of them all, one of the most influential stories in the history of recorded human history, which is the Epic of Gilgamesh. And I want this in this universe. It is an absolute vanity project for The Rock. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is playing Gilgamesh in the movie. And then I struggled a lot on because that's the pitch, is it's a vanity project of The Rock playing Gilgamesh. And this could end up being a lot of different things. At first I had it kind of being a little bit more of a Fast and Furious thing. And I thought what would be even funnier is if you kind of made it you got the Jumanji guy. So Jake Kasdan, who did the modern Jumanji movies, he's the director. And then, but the real thing is, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, there's kind of 2 main big characters. There's Gilgamesh himself, and then there's Enkidu, who is a man created by the gods, who's like a wild man who lives out in nature, and Gilgamesh encounters him. They ultimately become allies, and Enkidu must be become civilized. He does that in the story through having sex with a prostitute, basically. It's a whole thing. And at first I had Enkidu being played by Vin Diesel, because I thought I gotta fix the fractured relationship between these 2 actors. But when I realized what would actually be way funnier, another co-star who's worked with The Rock is Jack Black. Have Jack Black play Enkidu, the wild man out in nature who needs to learn what civilization is. And I think he can bring the right kind of pathos while also certain humor to the story. I think that's a good one. And then my actual favorite piece of casting, I left over from the Fast and Furious idea I had, but I realized this piece of casting is too good, I wouldn't change it, is Ishtar, the goddess Ishtar, who's a major character of the Epic of Gilgamesh, is played by Michelle Rodriguez. And I'm very passionate about that one.
Oh, I actually think you've pitched a good movie here. I think that sounds great. Jake Kasdan is probably one of the better directors The Rock has worked with, because he at least is competent and can be funny and stuff. And I think the Jack Black pairing, now I'm just imagining it'd be a comical version of Gilgamesh, and it would be pretty good, because usually The Rock works with the most no-name, nothing bland directors. Jake Kasdan can at least point and shoot a camera competently. I think this could be good. And Michelle Rodriguez is awesome, so yeah. I'm into this. This sounds good.
I mean, we're still at number 5, so it's still okay here.
Yeah.
All right, now number 4 is this. My pitch for this one is the Odyssey. This is a big hit, and the studios want to capitalize on that, but they don't want to spend that much money doing it. So we get basically what happened with the movie 300, where they made this weird sequel to it called 300 Rise of an Empire, with Zack Snyder as an executive producer or whatever. And so this is the scenario where it's we're kind of trying to make a cheap thing in the world of the Odyssey. No Christopher Nolan, he can produce it. He probably doesn't really want to. The director, I say in my notes here, honestly, not that important. You wouldn't know who he was if you watched it. I picked a random Marvel movie director, and I ended up with Julius Onah from the most recent Captain America. I just figured someone who did a Marvel movie.
Poor guy.
I don't know. I haven't seen that movie. He might be good. He might not. I don't know.
I don't think you can say he directed that movie, given what we know about its behind the scenes. I don't think he is. I don't think you can blame any of that movie on him.
I'm not blaming anybody on anything. Yeah. I'm just saying it's he would be in the same boat with this film. I think this would be a very by the numbers production. And then for the cast, I try to get people who are good, because these movies often have good actors, but they're just not the top level stars except for 1 or 2 roles. Now the main one is our lead, of course, would be Achilles. I struggled a lot on this one, and I figured this would be a great opportunity after the flop of Craven for Aaron Taylor Johnson to try to make his comeback. So Aaron Taylor Johnson, he is our Achilles. He got very fit for that Craven movie. He can keep that going. For Agamemnon, I've got Jason Isaacs, who is, I think, a very cool actor, but is just not like a big main Hollywood star. So you think he's in these kind of projects, but he's very cool. His brother Menelaus, Richard Armitage, another cool actor that's just not usually, he had his big shot with The Hobbit, but felt like that, didn't propel him to Hollywood stardom. For Hector, I needed one of the Hemsworths, so I picked Liam. So it's Liam Hemsworth plays Hector. Hector's got to be played by an Australian. That's the rules. It was Eric Bana originally in Troy, so I got to keep that going. Then for Odysseus, I thought a good piece of casting. Got Jonathan Groff of like Criminal, or oh god, what's the name of that show? The one that had all the serial killers. That
Criminal Minds?
Fincher. No. It's God, now it's going to kill me. I need to look it up really quick. Mindhunter, yeah. So he was the main guy in that. He was in that one episode of Doctor Who with Ncuti Gatwa.
He's best known as a Broadway star, to be clear. He's a musical actor, yeah.
And I thought that'd be an interesting Odysseus. So I thought this is the movie that would have, because again, if you look at the 300 Rise of an Empire, it's got a bunch of pretty good people in it. It's probably horrible. I haven't watched it. It's probably an absolutely dreadful movie.
It got actually good reviews specifically for Eva Green's performance, who is a phenomenal actress, and apparently people said it was worth seeing for her specifically, but maybe not anything else.
And that's the thing I'm aiming at for this, that everything else in the movie is a tragedy, but there's some pretty good performances. They got some interesting people in there.
And this would be the Iliad, basically, is what you're saying?
The Iliad, yes. So it's the story of Achilles fighting, near the end of the war, have his big fight with Hector. All that kind of stuff.
Makes sense.
All right. Number 3. I'm pretty proud of this one, is an adaptation of the Divine Comedy. Specifically, right now we're just talking about Dante's Inferno. This is going to be a Netflix original movie. They're taking inspiration from the hit EA video game Dante's Inferno that turned it into a big epic action adventure. This is going to be directed by Zack Snyder. He's planning to make a whole trilogy doing the whole Divine Comedy. He only ends up getting the first movie done. And then for my cast here, for the Divine Comedy, the story of it, such that it is, it's not a very narrative thing. But you have Dante, who's the pilgrim, is himself in the story, and he is led through hell and then the other stages of the afterlife by Virgil, the Roman poet. And he's specifically also chasing after his deceased wife, Beatrice, who is there in the afterlife. For Dante, I've got John Krasinski from The Office, but now he's doing all his Jack Ryan stuff. So he's trying to do his action star thing. So he's here to be Dante. For Virgil, I figured I need someone with a great voice and kind of presence there, because it's going to be a very kind of spectral performance. Got Ian McShane. I feel like that's a good Virgil. And then Beatrice is, of course, Emily Blunt, because she's just John Krasinski's wife. They're in The Quiet Place together. So there you go. That's easy. Now, the most important thing is that Odysseus is, of course, in Dante's Inferno, because he is in hell, and that is one of the sections of the story. And I want the brief appearance of Odysseus to be a cameo done by Ben Affleck, because he thought it would be funny because Matt Damon is in the movie, as Odysseus in the actual movie. But of course, they make this movie. People hate it. It's despised. They end up scrapping the plans for the full trilogy. And then Snyder later releases a 4.5 hour long director's cut that he swears is really good, but nobody ever knows because nobody saw it.
It's Rebel Moon.
It's Rebel Moon, but Dante's Inferno.
All right. I actually kind of want to see that out of morbid curiosity.
Yes. I just like the idea of John Krasinski trying to be his action star thing, and then he ends up going down a very dark path.
My only thing is that the only thing is actually, in reality, I do think Zack Snyder is better at casting than that. If he's good at one thing in his life, he is a phenomenal caster, and I think he would probably say no to that. But for the joke, I will let you have it.
Thank you. All right, number 2. This one's very cursed, is a Paramount Plus exclusive series adaptation of the Canterbury Tales that's being showrun by J.J. Abrams. So J.J. Abrams coming back to TV. The Canterbury Tales, of course, is about a group of pilgrims on their way to Canterbury, and during their pilgrimage, they are telling stories to each other. That it is the same kind of narrative as the Decameron. So this is the dark shadow of my Decameron miniseries by Phoebe Waller-Bridge earlier. Here, J.J. Abrams inserts some sort of esoteric, vague, overarching plot line that all the different tales sort of vaguely suggest that in a mystery box fashion, but it never comes together. And there's something sinister about the cathedral in Canterbury they're working towards, but you never really find out what it was. And then for the cast, the only one I felt like, well, I gotta, throw a bone here, is I'm going to put Chaucer in it himself, because some people read the kind of narrative lens of the story as being a self-insert of Chaucer. And I'm going to have Paul Bettany reprise his role from A Knight's Tale, where he played Geoffrey Chaucer in that movie. So we're get Paul Bettany back there. And then other than that, I'm like, you just get some like decent TV actors. For whatever reason, I thought of, hey, get Jeffrey Donovan, the star of Bird Notice. He can be the knight in The Knight's Tale.
Who's David Boreanaz and Nathan Fillion? Do they both get to be in it?
They can be in here. Like, David Boreanaz can be like the summoner. Nathan Fillion, he can be like the miller. That's these, I think that would be a fun one because it's a comic one. The only other one I came up specifically is, I think this would actually be pretty cool, is Alex Kingston being the wife of Bath. I think that would be a fun one. But there's like a billion characters in the Canterbury Tales. Is just pick any sort of like pretty good TV actor you can think of, and they'll be in here somewhere because there's like 50 fucking characters.
Sounds good to me. I mean, it sounds terrible because it's J.J. Abrams and it won't even make it a full season. But yeah.
Which will be appropriate because the Canterbury Tales famously was never finished by Chaucer. So if J.J. Abrams never gets to the end of his story, hey, that's just a faithful adaptation of the original. God. All right, my number one, again, I'm stretching. This is not pre-modern, but this is the one that as soon as you gave me this prompt, it just flashed in my mind like a terrible vision of a horrible future that hopefully never comes to pass. The number one is Paradise Lost, with the main character Satan being played by Jared Leto. And the director, and as giving him a chance to redeem himself after Joker 2, is going to be Todd Phillips. So Todd Phillips' Paradise Lost, starring Jared Leto as Satan. And then the other major characters is we have Adam and Eve. And I thought it would be Chris Pratt is going to be Adam and Sydney Sweeney is going to be Eve.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So there's been a meme going around. I think it's technically inflated and it's not quite accurate, but it just speaks to this. The meme is Jared Leto's last 4 films have lost an estimated total of $900 million. Again, I think that is inflated for their budgets, but it is true. He has not been in anything remotely resembling a hit in years, but he just keeps getting cast, and he's like the mark of death. Even the new He-Man movie, Masters of the Universe, where he's Skeletor, which I would see that movie. It's surprisingly good, and he is actually a surprisingly good Skeletor. They literally kept him off the press tour. They didn't put his name on posters. They did everything they could to hide the fact Jared Leto was in the movie, and the movie still bombed. And I think this sounds about right, because him and Todd Phillips together, they could make the greatest bomb of all time.
Yes, that's why I'm thinking here. Out of like one of the most like significant works of English literature in the modern period, Paradise Lost, just an incredible thing. And again, if you tried to make me watch this movie, if it actually existed, I would, I would go figure out what the afterlife is actually like personally.
I was going to say, maybe Satan is actually one of the few roles Jared Leto could nail, because, although except in Paradise Lost, Satan is supposed to be, if not likable...
A complicated figure.
Complicated... That's okay, he can't do that. That's why he was actually a good Skeletor, because he was playing a complete comic book Saturday morning villain, and I can buy Jared Leto as that. Once you make him human in any way, no. So, yeah, you're right. In a different context, he could be Satan, not in Paradise Lost.
Yeah. And you know this is evil, because I don't know if it's coming through on the mic, but a thunderstorm literally just started. like rain is starting to pour down and thunder sounded in the distance. So I think I've summoned something truly horrible by speaking about this fucking imagined film. It's like God himself is trying to intervene. It's like, this is too evil. What are you talking about? It's like rumbling off in the distance.
All right. Well, Sean, that was very good. That was very fun. Now I want to know, what have you got for me for August?
All right. And so a lot of what we talked about today on this podcast was, of course, the interesting, I'll use that adjective, interesting news involving the video game industry. And I think, we're clearly at a big turning point for the video game industry where things are going to change in the future. And I want you to imagine you've got like a magic mirror, and that allows you to see 50 years into the future, into parallel universes of where things are going to go. I want you to give me 10 visions for what the video game industry will be in 50 years, ranked from best to worst. Number 10 being the best you think it might end up, and number 1 being the worst version of what the video games will be in 50 years.
Can I just say there won't be any for like 10? Just
no, there has to be something resembling a video game industry, because it's not going to totally go away. Maybe we don't have PlayStations and things like that, but there'll be people playing solitaire on their cell phones, till the day we stop to exist. So there's got to be something. But I want you to think about what are all the different paths that we might take from this point on.
I was about to make a joke, and then I realized I think the joke I was about to make should just be my number 1. So I'm just going to write that down to myself now and save it for the next episode. All right?
All right. Well, I'm very excited to see what you learn from your scrying mirror about where things are going to go in our very, I think, bright and hopeful future for the video game business.